Hey guys, sorry I didn't do the big warm up and all of that. I'm gonna just bring Rob out and we'll just have a great time, man. Rob, welcome to the show. Oh, did I catch you off guard?
No. I'm good. I'm trying to figure out how on my
Mike,
end.
You're muted.
It says it should be working.
So make sure you select the right mic. It's a little arrow beside the mute button.
Okay. Is this working? Check. Can you hear me now? Check. No?
Getting there.
Is it maybe on your end because it's showing up?
All right, I'm going to go ahead while you fix that. All right, guys, welcome to the show. I know that it's an odd time for us. I don't normally start this early, but that's okay. I see we've already got SD Guy 64 is in the chat. Wally is in the chat. Ticky Tack is in the chat. Why didn't? Oh, that's. Let me. I'm going to hide him while he gets that sorted. Agropolis is in the chat. I see you guys out there. Normally, I play some music and we get warmed up and everything is cool. But tonight, I'm doing something a little different. We're starting a little early. Rob's joining us, obviously, and it's going to be a great show for everyone. If you didn't get to see the debate last night on Gibbs TV, it's awesome. I mean, it's great. It's got everything you want, including, I got a clip later. You're going to love it, including stuff that nobody saw coming, especially me, especially not me. So as soon as Rob gets sorted here, I mean, I thought he had it, but it was actually looked like it was recognizing that you were speaking. We just didn't have any volume from you. How's that, Rob?
Good. Can you hear me? It's showing up.
It shows that you're speaking, but there's no volume. Over at the bottom of the screen, there's a little button that's a little mute button, and then there's a tab or an arrow beside it. Click that and then select whatever you're.
Yep. It says I'm good. It shows that I'm talking. Check. Let's see. Check.
His mic.
Check. I think maybe it's you can't hear me.
Oh, wait. Okay, Rob, try again.
Check. Can you hear me?
No. All right, stand by. Let me make sure. Hang on.
Apologize to everyone for this.
No, that's got that. Okay. I froze.
Check.
I don't normally freeze.
Is there a way to full screen this? There we go.
Well, this is weird.
Huh.
I alone can't hear him. Yeah, why is that?
Okay, can you all hear grid on my end is my question. I don't know if you could see this, but if you can see this on my
end. All right, stand by. I think I might have it. Give me 1 second.
Okay. Sorry for.
Got it. Got it, Rob. Got it.
It wasn't me for once.
It was not you. You know what? So what happens, Rob, and I know that you play these games too. You go to Discord and they've got a completely different soundboard setup, and then I come back over here and I had the chat muted last night. That's what it was.
Mm-hmm.
So Rob, how the hell are you, buddy?
I'm doing good. I'm using a new thing. I'm using StreamYard. So on my end, I couldn't get your picture up. I couldn't get your volume. Then I got you and they couldn't hear me. And my audience is like, well, I'm on grids. I could hear him. So, I think we have all the talent in the world. It's just the tech eludes us,
The thing is that it's one of those things where like nothing plays together very well, right? Like none of it works together.
Well,
thank God we're streaming. I got tired of arguing with libtard chats. I have debated a leftist every day this week, or a team of leftists, and I got to tell you, It's great to have a night off. It's great to have a night off.
You were on Gibbs' show last night, you said?
I was. I got a clip. Do you want to see a clip?
Let's
We'll
see
start
it.
right out with a clip. Hang on, stand by. Let me let me this is great. This is great. Yeah, it's rare. So I don't actually do very many clips. Or a matter of fact, I'm talking to your clips guy to be, to help me out with clips because
he's great. I have nothing but great things to say. Anyone who's watching, follow Black Elk on X. If you ever need any editing work, he is absolutely amazing.
Literally everyone has said that same thing, and they're like, "Yeah, you've got it. You got to get that guy. He's legit." And so I started the conversation, but we just keep missing each other because of scheduling. I don't have time to talk to people anymore. It's weird. I know you don't have any idea what that's like, Rob. Not being honest.
For your audience that might not know, I do home health care with adults with disability. I usually average about 80 to 90 hours a week. Plus, then I'm an old man. I'm 40, but I have my first child. He's 4 years old, so I try to hang out with him a lot. And that's one of the disadvantages we have to many of the libs we debate. Most of them do this full time. A lot of us got our hands in a bunch of other pies, whether it be being family people, having full-time jobs, etc. So, but that's all right. They need every advantage they can get. When you're on the wrong side of every issue, you need every advantage.
That's true. It's true. That's very funny. It's very extremely funny because it's exceptionally true. Let me know if I need to turn the audio up on this. So go ahead and show that on the screen. And I'll hit play over here. I say I will.
There it is.
Be the one let go because we did not have the resources.
Turn it up a little.
All right, stand by me. I thought I had the volume up, but I'm not even seeing.
Actually, like a predominant culture issue, or because of
Well, what I'm saying is that when something like the VA
Marxist,
and you need
Rob, she's a Marxist.
And specific people so that veterans can get the care that they need. I left because I knew that person that they could not fucking replace him, but they could replace me. So I think you're gonna get weird, sex crazy things happening because you're putting people in positions of power that they could abuse. Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
No, it's absolutely absurd. I don't know if you can explain it. Yeah, how did that make sense, brother? Make it make sense.
Okay, so I guess maybe try to say it, the argument would be so I go to the restaurant and I had employees that they were shitty, but I was in a small area with not very many to hire. So I would have to retain shitty employees. And if someone complained, they would let go because I can't afford to lose the other one because I don't have funding or resources to give them the places. Am I crazy, Charlie? Or
Thank you.
Pause it real quick. I think you're not wearing a headset, so your audio is coming through your microphone, so everything's echoing.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
So I don't usually have that problem. Well, I have my volume up. I turn my volume up a little bit.
Okay.
Now we'll try again.
All right.
Do you want me to? Do you need to go back through or?
Yeah. Even when I talk, I hear the echo real bad. Unless it's something on my end. It almost sounds like
I have no echo on my end.
Yeah, it sounds like your computer speakers are maybe going into your microphone.
No, on my end it sounds great.
Oh, okay. I don't know. I'll check and see if it's on my end or not. But okay. But yeah, go ahead and finish it out.
All right. Now this is great, by the way.
Fucking weird orgies or weirder things happening because you are putting people in positions where they are like fucking invaluable, dude.
Okay, I'm not gonna lie, Charlie.
That's illegal. I'm gonna tell you that if that happened, all the deaths I know would go there.
someone else posted a link in our group chat talking about this.
I also posted the share chat.
Yeah, my apologies. My apologies. And it was like fucking organized through their team chat.
I just posted.
Okay, can we move off of the absurdity and back into the debate portion,
Sure,
please?
go ahead.
Actually, Pin Couple guy has been waiting, and I keep talking.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Couple. You can go, and then.
So that was that was just a small portion of last night, Rob.
Yeah, that's wow. I mean, I just don't like dealing with these people. There are moments that stick in my head of like just random debates I've done online for the past 5-6 years. She reminds me of this woman I was debating from Australia during COVID or the pandemic. Be careful during the pandemic, and they said, "Well, we could lock down forever because the government gives us food." And I was like, but where does the government get food from? And she's like, I don't know. And I was like farmers, but you just lock them down. And she was like, well, they could work. And I was like, okay, well, how's the food get to where do you buy it? She's like, the store. I was like, how's it get to the store? She's like, I don't know. And I was like, yeah, like trucks, right? Yeah, I guess we'll let those people work. Well, who's going to work at the supermarket? Yeah, I guess we'll let those people work. And it's just like some of these people they're like basically arguing for illegal things. It's like, oh, it is tough. So I sympathize with you. Those panels like that, sometimes they're not sending their best. So
it was really interesting because she right out of the gate says she's a Marxist. She identifies as queer, not lesbian, queer. Okay. I don't understand the difference, but whatever. It's fine. Don't have to. And there was never an argument made, Rob. It was nothing but rambling nonsense. I'll have to clip my closing remark to her because it was funny. Now I'm going to have her on the show at some point where it's not a debate and maybe she can make some kind of sense and have a conversation. But debate, not her forte.
Yeah, listen, I tell people this all the time to defend her a little. You don't have to be good at debate. It's just one skill. Like if you're not a good mechanic, that doesn't mean you're a bad person. You could be a political streamer and not be the best at debates. That's fine.
Right.
But some people, like, what frustrates me the most is when you're debating someone that literally can't follow like a chain of logic through a conversation, right? Like in everyday life, we have conversations with people that aren't necessarily debates. And the only way that communication can work is if like we understand like sort of a linear thought process. So you'll say something like, we're out of milk. And then your wife will be like, oh, you should go to the store and get milk. And you'll be like, okay, where's my wallet? And there are people that they can't follow that chain. Like you'll be like, I'm out of milk. And they'll be like, we should elect Obama again. And you're like, but what's that have to do with the milk? And they're like, huh? Do you remember when we won when we run the relay in the Olympics? And you're just like, wait, what? And it becomes frustrating. Like people don't understand. And then as you get more in depth and you're actually like getting to high levels of debate, like I used to do in like the game of debate in college, like I guess you just learn to follow that linear chain because you're setting arguments up like an hour before that they come to fruition. So oftentimes when you try to take that to this level, you're dealing with people that can't follow the most basic linear chain and it just falls apart. And then everyone kind of looks dumber for it because you're like, I don't even know how to respond to this. There was a trans person named Polly People that I debated once on the Crucible. Andrew Wilson stopped the debate like 40 minutes in. And he was like, I've never done this. I'm stopping the debate. We have to end it. Because they were so bad. Like they couldn't follow. They'd be like, oh, well, do you have a study that says that? And I'd be like, yeah, here's what the study says. It had to do with the pandemic and vaccines. And they were just like, well, but Trump, like, his business does X, Y, Z. And I was like, but you asked for the study. Let's go through the study. And so Andrew had to stop the debate because it's like, it's just, what do you say at that point? So I think that's what it's like talking to a lot of left-wing people. And I think most people experience this to some level, because even if you're not debating like this, like on a panel with a camera and a video, you might be arguing, if you're watching a show like Grid or Minds, you might be arguing with people on like X or on Facebook or something. And you've experienced this. You know, how many times will you lay out like a thought-provoking claim like, listen, I think that because of the disastrous interventionist foreign policy decisions that our intel agents and deep state have made in the past 20 years, maybe it's time we take a step back and don't be the world police and we focus on problems that we have back home. And the response will be like, why do you love Putin? And you're just like, what? Like, but that's it. That's the level that they're capable of going.
But, you know, even so that was one of the things I noticed with Wick last night is I'm like, Wick, why do we want to, we're asking Putin to stop a war. Why do you want to be a dick to that guy? And he's like, oh, you know, it looks like Trump's going to just give him some shit. I forget what it was. Lift the sanctions. It was lift the sanctions. He's going to lift the sanctions. And I'm like, oh, cool. Sounds like a good plan. So that's a good negotiating tactic. Say that you might. You don't have to.
Well, even if you do,
that's negotiating 101, baby.
You could always put them back on.
Yeah.
This is what.
Whoa, Rob, you hit the wrong button. Where'd you go? Oh, gotta get over here. There we go. You hit the wrong button.
That's enough for them. When it comes to like people that are sort of egotistical. And I think that Putin's one of them. I'm no love for Putin whatsoever. I don't like him at all. But when it comes to people like that, I think Trump understands that you could placate their ego, but then be aggressive with your words, but then be aggressive with policies.
Absolutely.
There wasn't a more hawkish president to Russia, sometimes to his detriment. I didn't like everything that Trump was doing towards Russia because I thought it was going to needlessly lead to an escalation. But he was very hawkish towards Russia. And even though we were told he was a puppet of Vladimir Putin, he was sanctioning diplomats, he was upping domestic oil.
He deported that one guy. Right?
Yeah. And then he was sending javelins, unlike Obama, to Ukraine. So he was doing all this stuff that was more hawkish than Obama.
Literally smacking Putin in the face. I mean, that's literally a smack in the face.
But
like, it's one thing to just say, be nice to the guy when he's in the same room to you.
Right.
And and this is what I liken it to. And I really wanted to get to Wick at this, but the problem with panel debates is you can't hammer points home, right? And so one of the things is that, you know, Wick just kept rolling on about how, you know, Trump is you know, Putin's whipping boy or whatever. But I'm like, look, don't you understand that to your face, I can be perfectly nice to you and shake hands and we can have a great conversation. And then 2 minutes later, when I walk through that door, I can say, go arrest that fucker.
Right.
Because he doesn't belong here. Right.
Well, you have to ask yourself, what is the goal of these people? What is it that they want? What I want is the best possible outcome for the world, the United States, and for Ukraine. So I want the war to stop like now. That's what I want. And then once it stops and we can hammer out a long-term plan, I would like a long-term plan where all sides feel like that they don't have to go to war. Now, that plan's going to mean that each side's going to have to give up some things they want. Who's going to have to give up more? The side that's losing, which is Ukraine, right? Russia's coming on it from the position of winning, and so their negotiating position is stronger. Trump understands that, like, listen, the real impediment, we have to convince Russia to stop the war. You don't have to convince, like, this is what the left doesn't understand. How could Trump talk to Putin without Zelensky? Because, like it or not, Zelensky's irrelevant. If Trump tomorrow could talk to Vladimir Putin and say, here's the deal, we'll enter in with you for a 5-year or a 50-year long mineral deal where we're going to buy all these minerals from you and we're going to lift sanctions and we're going to do this. And what we want you to do is completely leave Ukraine and send the borders back to 2020 levels. And if Putin says, I agree, what does Zelensky matter in that position? Nothing. Like, he just doesn't matter. And so the person that Trump's really signaling to the most is Putin. Hey, Putin, I know they say you're a monster. I don't look at it like that. We're looking to open business relationships with you. We're looking to lift sanctions with you, but we're going to need you to come to some agreement that you're going to pull out of Ukraine. You know, yeah, maybe you'll keep some of the territory, but we need this war to end. And then with Zelensky, he's being harsher, just like he's been with our allies all the time, because he feels like we've given something and we're not getting back what we deserve for our ally. And so that's what's going on. And the people that are like, well, this is pro-Russian, I think that it's pro-Ukrainian, because I want to see Ukrainian men stop dying in this meat grinder of a war. What's Wick's plan? And notice their plan is always something like this. It's like, well, do you want to send boots on the ground? No. So then what do you want to do? Continue the Biden policy of sending just enough where there's basically a stalemate and Ukrainian men die by the tens of thousands every month. That's the plan? You know?
Yeah, no, that really seems like it. I'm gonna. Somebody sent me the closing. Let me throw this up on the screen so you can. I want you to. I don't know that you're going to get quite the laugh I got out of it, but I had fun with it. I really did. So there we go. Let me throw that up there. This is spirited discussion. Charlie, I'm sorry. I could not really follow your rambling. I wanted to. I tried hard. I couldn't do it. Honestly, Wick, man, you made some solid points. I appreciate most of what you said. Some of us, I don't think that you were acting in the best of faith, but hey, man, you tried. Way to go. And Prime, if I could have heard you, man, I would have responded more.
Hey,
Your mic, bro.
I would have turned up the mic.
I said something at the beginning.
earlier,
I didn't hear it. I'm sorry. But
Yeah, it's all right, man. And to everyone else, it was great. Especially Aiko, good to see you again. The rest of you guys, I think I've been on panel with Tyler before, but yeah, look, it was a good spirited discussion. Charlie, I'm sorry, you're rambling. I wanted to. I tried hard. I couldn't do it. Honestly, there we go.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes that's all you could say, right? Like, I tried. Prime and Wick are capable of forming arguments. I don't know this Charlie character.
Well, that was the Marxist. That's a Twitch person who's trying to get into debate. Gibbs wants to attract a bunch of her following. And he, so there's this really weird thing in the Twitch space that it seems like that they feel like they can't get conservatives to debate them on their channels. Of course, I only go on YouTube. I mean, I will stream back to Twitch, but I never go there, and mainly because I'm like, at some point, if I say what I mean, I'm going to get banned anyway. So why do I care?
Yeah, Twitch. I got banned for 30 days because I
know
Connor on. Connor got a 7-day ban, even though he was the one saying all that shit. So I'm going to be done with Twitch. I might stream 1 or 2 times more there. I feel bad for the people that subscribe to me there. So I don't want to cheat them, even though they've lost their money, I guess, for this month that I've been banned.
Sure.
That sucks. So I'll probably stream there a couple more times just to let them know that I'm done. But yeah, I'm done with Twitch. The other thing is what you have to realize, and I was talking to one of the producers for The Crucible today, Andrew Wilson's sort of channel. If you get banned on Twitch, you can't talk to anyone on Twitch. So like, for example, let's say, that Gibbs is streaming on Twitch. He can't have you on anymore. So the best thing for someone like me to do is just to end my Twitch channel. Then the chances of me getting banned on
That's
Twitch
what Fabian Liberty did.
Right.
He got banned. And he's like, fuck you guys. Done.
Yeah. So I'm just going to be done with Twitch. That way, if I say something that's against their terms of service, it doesn't mean that anyone who talks to me ever again that's on Twitch. But yeah, I mean, the writing was on the wall with Twitch, believe it or not, when they banned Destiny. Destiny was keeping afloat so much of the sort of Twitch debate sphere because the platform is brutally hostile to conservatives through shadow bannings, through actual bannings, the manipulation of the algorithm. So you get almost no luck there anyways. Believe it or not, here's the dirty little secret. Twitch doesn't want politics that much anyways. They're fine with Asma Golden Hassan, and that's about it. So everyone that you were running into was relying on Destiny. They were either a Destiny orbiter or doing a bad impression of Destiny. So when you did a panel like a Prime K's panel, there might be 100 to 200 people watching, and then Destiny joins, and now there's 15,000 watching. So when they banned him, the writing was on the wall, and it's became an echo chamber. And I hate to say this, stir the pot here, a little drama. After the last time I was on Wick's show, I'm not going to do Wick's show anymore. I don't wish him ill. we could get into exactly what I'm talking about. If you're
we got time.
So long story short, I'm of the feeling now that when it comes to issues of corruption, which I've talked about almost on a nightly basis for 5 to 6 years streaming live, and I've gone into debates good faith over and over again. I've done every panel you can imagine. I've debated every big name supposed online Twitch, YouTube streamer from the left, done all this stuff. Almost to a person, all of them have downplayed any kind of corruption towards Trump supporters, etc. And now they want to kick and scream because Trump put out a tweet quoting the Napoleon movie. And they want to talk about corruption.
Right.
And so I had all of these people like adding me on X. What do you have to say? And I was like, I don't owe you people anything. Now, I did talk about Trump's tweet, and I talked about it probably 4 times in addition to other people, in addition to just talking about it on my show. But I don't owe someone who's just someone that's like, yay, corruption against Trump. That's great. Use lawfare against him. Yippee. And then when Trump quotes Napoleon, they say, we demand you call out corruption. Like, no, I'm sorry, not interested. I'm not going to have this X battle with you. Simultaneously, I did agree to do a panel on Wick's show. And my strategy going into that panel about this tweet was going to be, hey, you on the left that have a problem with this tweet, can you show me like you condemning the FISA warrants that were illegal to go after Trump's team? And if they couldn't, then my strategy in that panel was going to say, I don't give a shit anymore about people making these demands. These people on this panel don't actually care about corruption. They only care about hating Trump. That's what's going on here. But the one guy that I didn't know at the time was going to be on the panel, he sent me a quote of him, or a copy paste pic of him condemning corruption against Trump. I was excited. I was like, great, change my entire strategy. Absolutely. Then I'm willing to talk about this tweet. And I don't think it's as bad as people say, but I didn't like it. And I'll give you my honest opinion. That was my take on it. And then we start the debate and we're like 10 minutes in. And that guy's like, you know, do you think that Trump shouldn't just be allowed to break the law? And I'm like, of course. Oh, I'm glad I got you to admit that because I photoshopped that tweet.
I saw that.
Now,
I saw that.
My feeling on that is if you would have waited till the end to say that, I would have been like, fuck it. What can I do? It's really no skin off my back. But the intent of saying it that early in the debate was to try to like big man me. And so I'm just like, fuck you. I'm not talking to you anymore. You go or I go. And then I later said, I'll just mute you and I'll respond to the other dude, but I'm not talking to you. And all of that's fine. And Wick has every right at that point as a moderator to be like, yeah, man, if you got to go, go. But I'm not going to kick this guy. He had every right to say that. But instead, what Wick did was say, can you, like, what do you mean? Explain yourself. And I started to try to explain myself. And Wick decides that he's going to, as he always does when I'm on his show, he's going to jump in as a debater. Not as the moderator, but as the debater.
That's every show, I think.
Yeah, that's what he does. So he jumps in and he's got the mute button and all this. And he decides he's just going to filibuster for like 4 minutes talking where he's like calling me a traitor to the country and saying that I'm just like destiny sweepers that are sweeping up for and blah, 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 blah. And so then I start trying to talk over him. And what I was saying, if you couldn't hear it, was, look, I don't think Wick's talented. I don't think he's a good debater. I don't think he's a good host. I don't think he's a good moderator. I think that he was basically AstroTurf because he was in Progressive Victory. Sure. So they tried to get him bigger guest and tried to put him out there. And I don't think they'll be hiring him again because I don't think he did a good job. I hope they hire him again because I don't really dislike Wick as a person. And if it's money that he could use for himself, I don't have a problem with that. And it also benefits me when shitty Democrat organizations like that piss their money away on things that I don't think is going to help them in the long run. So if you're listening to Progressive Victory, man, you should really give Wick a ton of money. Trust me, he's going to do good for you. But that's it.
He's your man.
So anyways, and then Andrew Wilson went on afterwards, like, what the fuck you doing, Wick? And Wick had his big man. It's my show. I mute whoever I want. Okay. Then I saw Wick put out a post on X like yesterday. It was like, hey, I'm looking for good conservatives to come on my show. Good luck. That's all I have to say. I'm uninterested. Good luck. Yeah. I mean, that's the echo chambers that they build. And I don't need that dude. I don't need any of them. Right? I don't need Dylan Burns. I don't need Prime Case. I'm not saying I dislike Dylan or Prime. I'm just saying I don't need the people on the left that put on these panels. The lefties are a dime a dozen. You could throw a rock and hit a lefty talking politics on Twitch. There's a million of them.
Literally.
But where are you going to find the conservatives? And so if you treat the limited ones, I'm not saying I'm nowhere near as big as like Andrew Wilson. Right. So alienating him and trying to big man him is probably an even worse idea for Wick. Because if Andrew does his show, he's at least going to have 1,000 people watching. But I usually have 150 to 200 people watching me live. And Okay, I'm not here to be like, I hope Wick falls apart. I hope conservatives start doing a show. I'm not saying any of that. Good luck to them. I don't give a shit. But I'm uninterested. That's all. That's all I'm saying. I'm uninterested. And then what happens is they're like, well, we need people. Should have thought of that, I guess. I don't know what to say. So that's what happens there as far as I'm concerned. So Wick could be the big man that's like, when it's my show, I control the mute button. It's my show. I do what I want. That's true. You do. Good luck with you. You know, that's it. That's all I'm saying. Now, maybe both of us, when Wick becomes the left's Joe Rogan, maybe both of us will be eating crow. We'll be like, shit, we should have sucked up the Wick.
I probably won't eat crow. I'll probably be like, good for that guy.
That's what I would say too. I think that about, like, I really don't, like, I don't know. I'm
Rob, you're too good a person. I mean, you look. I've listened to you now for months. You know, Andrew Wilson's actually the one that kind of turned me on to you, because he's like, Rob Noerr is the best debater, period. He's way better than me. And I was like, all right, I got to go find out about Rob Noerr.
That's not true, by the way. I'm better at debating certain issues than Andrew. There's a difference in what we're interested in. Andrew has this more of like philosophical style. When you talk to Andrew Wilson, it's like talking, you know, Fabian Liberty or Casimir. When you talk to those guys, you're going to have to interrogate why you think everything that you think in life. What are your core moral principles, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just
I love talking to Scott.
I'm a dumb redneck. So I don't operate like on that level of shit. I'm like, because
I'm a real redneck.
My dad told me to be nice to people. That's why I'm nice to people. Yeah, but philosophically, like, where does that come from? What does being nice mean? I don't know. I know it when I see it. When my neighbor needs help carrying groceries in, I do it. And I don't have to sit there. For me, I'm not sitting there. By the way, I'm not making fun of any of those people I just mentioned. You should interrogate where you get your system of morality and things like that. So I'm not the best debater on those sorts of things. I sort of muddle through. I'm a good debater in that I think that I'm a good conversationalist. I have an ability to understand things and interpret them in a way that average people can understand. So I could hear someone talking about like a philosophical concept and be like, is what you're basically saying this? And they're like, yeah, that's basically it. And I'm like, okay, I could give my honest opinions on that. And when you do that and you have sort of a strong foundation on what you believe, you could talk a lot of topics because, you know, there's other people that are fantastic debaters on their niche. So maybe someone that's like an economist and they'd be a really good debater about the economy. But if you start talking foreign policy or you start talking, you know, ethics or something like that, they just, you know, they're kind of struggling. So, but I appreciate those kind words from Andrew. I do.
Yeah, I really enjoy talking to Scott. I really enjoy it.
So here's the pros and cons of Scott. If you're trying to set up a panel, Scott makes it difficult. He'll deny this, but it's true. It's always going to be talking about ANCAP stuff. But it makes sense because he knows that his sense
of it's his worldview, right?
That's right. So you
just like if I have Andrew on, and it gets anywhere near, which it almost always will, if it gets anywhere near anything that's going to be more moral or any of that, religion's going to be brought in, right? Because he's going to look through through a Christian worldview.
So right? Like if you have a conversation about OnlyFans stuff, if you talk to someone who's a Christian nationalist or Christian populist like Andrew, that's going to inform their worldview. If you talk to an ANCAP, that's going to inform their worldview. Right. And so it makes sense. The problem is because it's very technical concepts and it's hard for a lot of average people to understand. If you're setting a panel up and you have Scott or Casimir on there, what happens is oftentimes that ends up dominating the conversation and an audience gets lost because they're dealing with people that don't even have a fucking clue with what they're talking about. So like Casimir might be, and even I'm guilty of this, right? Casimir might be like, give you a very technical explanation of what the non-aggression principle means. And someone just says like, oh, so you're saying we should be able to do fucking heroin in the streets. And then like, it's like, oh my God, like, I think you missed exactly what I was talking. So I love talking to them. I do, but I can understand how it could be like, some people might say, if you talk to them every day, it's like trudging through mud because it takes a long time because they're so technical in why they believe what they believe that it does take sometimes a long time to get from one place to another. But I love that. I love talking.
Yeah. So I think the only thing I've said to Casimir is hi. And that didn't
He's a good
require
guy.
much.
You'd like Kaz.
Yeah, that didn't take much explanation. But But Scott and I have had some really good conversations, and in the middle of Prime's panel, he and I'll start going back and forth down some trivial thing, and it drives Prime crazy.
Prime's okay. I feel bad for Prime. I feel like he got screwed over in the whole Dylan Burns situation. Yeah. Not to rehash that, but
yeah,
I think that, if we're just talking a little drama here, I think that the problem with Prime is that he was sort of a one-trick pony. And again, I'm not trying to insult him, but Prime hit at the right time where he hosted these panels, and they were big. The Twitch panels were big, but is he capable of doing content on his own? And I think that that's where like someone like Dylan Burns sort of passed him up, where Dylan was able to adjust. He's now in Ukraine and he's doing this other stuff that people find interesting. And I think Prime ride or died with the panels, hosting them. And, as the popularity of those go down, so too will the popularity of his channel.
I like Prime. I think he's a good guy. At the same time, he is the most emotional fuck that I've ever had as a moderator. Like, I literally can't deal with him sometimes. I'll literally just turn off the volume while he's ranting, because I can't, there's no point in listening to what he's saying.
Yeah, I've seen that too. It does. I think that the best moderator I've dealt with personally is Andrew on the Crucible. And the reason I say that is I feel like you could be someone who is 100% against Andrew's beliefs. You could be like a communist, that's arguing for why you should have drag shows for children. And Andrew's going to be a fair moderator about it. He will.
Yeah. Well, Yeah, and to be honest, so I have not moderated a lot of debates in the sphere, but when I do, I feel like I do a good job, and I try to be really fair. And the biggest thing is I really try and keep people from, like, one of the things I can't stand Wick. I don't know if I'm going to be able to go back on Wick's panel ever. He allows so much filibustering. It's crazy. Like, why? What are you doing, moderator? Just make this dude land the fucking plane. Amelia Earhart could have landed that plane. She's been gone 100 years. Like, what the fuck? Let's just get this done.
It's definitely, being a moderator is not fun work. I don't like it. I think I'm a good moderator, but I don't like it, because for me as a moderator, the entire time I'm like, well, shit, why doesn't this person
should have said that?
Why doesn't this, even if it's arguments for the other side, I'm like, why don't you say this? So I want to debate. I don't really want to moderate, but I thought I was fine at it. But what is your job as a moderator? Well, you sort of have two. One is you want to be fair to the participants, right? And that doesn't mean equal time for everyone, right? It's a dance. Sometimes you might moderate and if two people debating and one person talks 60% and the other person 40, maybe that's organically the way it went. But you do have to have a feel for making sure that both sides get a chance. But the other thing is you have a duty to the audience. You want to keep the audience entertained, and you want the audience to be able to follow. And so if one person's talking in 15-minute chunks and then the other person responds with 30 seconds, oftentimes that's not entertaining or informative for the audience. But you oftentimes find yourself, when those two things, being fair to the participants and being good to the audience, sort of clash. So I'll give you an example. I moderated a debate between Andrew Wilson and Dave Smith. And it was, Dave entered this conversation, I think, thinking it was going to be a conversation. And Andrew
he snubbed me.
What's that?
Dave Smith. When I asked him my question, he's like, I'm not going to answer that guy.
There you go. Was that in the debate I was moderating? Yeah.
It was.
I assumed, I thought I was talking to his dude that set up the debate, and I was like, hey, I'd love to talk to Dave on my channel someday. And I just didn't get any response. I'll chalk that up to him being busy and just not knowing me. But I hope it's not because he thinks that I was unfair to him as a moderator. Because
I think you did a very good job as moderator.
It was very difficult, because what happened was Andrew's sort of saying, look, where do you get your sense of morality from, right? And it presumably is a libertarian. It's going to be like a non-aggression principle thing. And Andrew's like, but I get my sense of morality through Christian ethics. And so we're going to debate which one is preferable. Where does your morality come from? And that's where he's talking about, Andrew sets this up, this argument about ownership of yourself. Well, if you don't have ownership of yourself, then where do your principles come from, etc. And Dave's just like, yeah, whatever. Like, he don't know anything about that, like, at all. Like, Dave's a libertarian like I'm a libertarian, which is just like, tell the government to fuck off. That's basically it. Small government's good. He's not a libertarian like Casimir or Fabian. that will tell you exactly where their principles come from. So for that debate, Fabian or Liquid Zulu or Casimir is 100 times more qualified than Dave Smith. But to Dave's defense, I guess he didn't expect it to be a debate. So Andrew is making this point that is literally fundamental to the rest of the debate. Where does your sense of morality come from? And if you can't tell me that, how can we proceed with the debate? What set of ethics should we prefer? And so as a moderator, it's clear that Dave's like, I'm over this portion of it. I have nothing to say.
Yeah,
but
he was
then
over.
is it fair for me to Andrew to be like, hey, Andrew, we're just going to move on? Because Andrew's going to be like, well, that's bullshit. Like, this is the entire debate. And I know that. And as someone who likes debate, I would have kept it there for 2 hours. And as a moderator, I'm thinking like, dude, if you can't answer this question, you're getting blown the fuck out. Like, that's what's happening. But thinking of the audience, and there's going to be a lot of people there from Dave's audience, they're like, why are we retreading this? We're not advancing the ball. So I left it go on for a while until finally I was like, okay, let's see if we can somehow move this along. But those two goals as a moderator clash, where you're trying to let the participants debate and you stay out of it as much as possible to be fair to them, but you're trying to move it forward for the audience as well.
Yeah, that was an excellent example of not enough communication beforehand, where I think Dave thought that he was just going to come on and answer some libertarian questions, and Andrew was, this is going to be a regular, everyday, normal, this is my 9 to 5 debate, right? And so when I think Glenn Lawrence or somebody went ahead of me and kind of railed on Dave a little bit. He was pretty bothered. And then I got up and I asked him something about the Constitution, or I forget what the fuck it was. I'd go back and look. But he's like, I'm not answering this guy. Fuck this guy.
Well, the best part was Casimir then comes on and asks a question, and he's clearly closer to being on Dave's side of the argument. But Kaz is setting up this point, expecting Dave to be like, yeah, of course, you're right. And Dave just intuitively reads the situation completely wrong. And he's like, oh, Kaz is arguing against me. So he starts pushing back, and you can see Casimir's like, what are you talking about? And it's got to be frustrating for someone like Kaz, because this is a dude that's basically claiming to share the same ideology as you. And then he gets these huge platforms, and Kaz and Fabian and other people like that are like, this dude doesn't know what he's talking about. It doesn't mean he's a bad person, by the way. I'm not saying that. And I think Dave's effective, and I like a lot of what Dave says. But from the perspective, it'd be like a comedian. It would be like if I said, well, I'm Lutheran, right? That's my religion. I'm Lutheran. And then people are like, what's that mean? And I'm like, I don't know. Jesus was a good guy. And the Lutherans are going to be like, wait, what? I don't know. I never really looked into it. I'm just Lutheran, and I'm here to advocate for Lutheran principles, but I don't know shit about it. It'd be frustrating. And so I understand why people that feel that they are real. That's why I don't call myself a libertarian. I call myself libertarian adjacent, because I'm not really.
Do you prefer religious, philosophical, or political debates?
I prefer political by a long shot. I think that I am a bad Christian. I definitely there's a valid. Yeah, I pick and choose. Right. Yeah. For example, I think that it is very fair reading of the Bible to say that being gay is a sin. I just don't give a shit. I feel God will sort it out. I don't think that we should promote homosexuality. I think that we should promote heterosexuality, and more than that, not just heterosexuality, but we should be promoting to a man and a woman in a monogamous relationship that leads to marriage in the eyes of God and rearing children and family. That's what normal should be. That's what should be promoted. That's what's most moral. That's what's best for society. But I don't give a shit that I have friends that are gay. I don't care. Just like I don't care that I have friends that have cheated on their girlfriend.
Well, so that's actually an interesting point. And I diffuse a lot of people because, I'm Southern Baptist, so I'm fire and brimstone. Everybody's going to hell unless you repent, all of that, And I can sit there and talk to people that are absolute degenerates and sinners and prostitutes or whatever. And I have actually been asked well, doesn't that bother you? And I'm like, why would it bother me? You're the one going to hell.
Right. That's sort of,
I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you're going to hell. I feel bad for you.
See, I don't know that they're going.
Unfortunately, I can't do anything about that. You have to do that.
Maybe they are, maybe they're not. I try to, you know, for me, I stay out of that. I think that if they are, they are, and that's part of what makes me a bad Christian. I read a compelling argument the other day about proselytizing, and it was like, you're immoral if you don't. If you think your friend's going to hell and you're not doing everything in your power to stop that, are you a friend? It's a fair point.
It is a fair point, but again, you got to find your own way to Christ, brother.
Yeah, that's my feeling. My feeling is, I don't know. I'm so sinful that I'm almost ashamed to call other people's sins other than in the most practical of ways in our society. Clearly, there are things that are beyond the pale. Assaulting of children, you know, people that support super late-term abortions. I see no moral case for that whatsoever. As much as I despise abortion, I could at least understand the case for like short-term abortions. I understand where that comes from, but long-term abortions, and there's other things, you know, sexual assaulters, murderers, things of that nature. But other than that, you know, I've always been sort of the belief that like I have so much to work on every day on my own life when it comes to being a moral person that that's my focus. And, you know, it just is what it is. I have friends that are gay that I think are more moral and less sinful than straight friends I have. They're, you know, in a monogamous relationship. They're not out there, you know, hooking up with different people every day and stuff like that. And if it's a sin, then they'll have to answer for that. They will.
Right. Yeah,
and
exactly. I can't answer that for you.
Yeah, and that's how I feel. And I just, you know, that's where I'm coming from. Yeah, I know I talked to Andrew. I'm very intrigued by the Orthodox Church. I am. And Andrew's position, and I assume this correctly represents the Orthodox position, is they don't really take a stance on whether or not you're going to hell. They don't. They're like, maybe, maybe not. That's beyond their purview, right? All they know is, we know this. I think we could all agree with this that are Christian, right? Everyone that enters heaven is a sinner, with the exception of Jesus. So just because you sin and we call out your sin isn't a guarantee that you're going to hell. Correct. And so from the Orthodox position, my guess is they're like, listen, it is more than just saving your soul that we're concerned with. We are concerned with this, how we live here on this earth, right? And even if you say, but I've accepted Jesus and I'll go into heaven, it's still worth calling out your sin. It's still worth having a political system that says, no, we will not embrace sin, you know? And so you're able to argue, for example, against LGBT issues while simultaneously saying, I don't know that you're going to hell, but I still condemn this because it's a sin.
Sure.
And just like, you know, lying is a sin and I condemn lying. That's not saying that me calling out you lying is condemning you to hell. It's irrelevant to me if you go to heaven or hell. A sin is a sin and I'm going to call it out. So I sort of respect that view of it, where it's like, I don't have to take a stance on ultimately what God's judgment of you is in order to understand what is sin and what isn't. Yeah. I think that's a solid argument.
Yeah, no, I think that's actually excellent. I personally just don't really. It's an interesting deal. I prefer not to do religious debates. I'm not really qualified. I'm not really I'm not a theologist. I didn't study the Bible in college or anything. I didn't do any of those things. At best, I'm a mediocre Christian, I think. Maybe. At best. So, I try not to debate religious, but I will say that most of my worldview is from that Southern Baptist, sin, repentance, all of that sort of deal. And I'm pretty clear about that, right?
I think that when it comes to, there's different things. Like there's my worldview. What do I do in my life? That does come from a Christian background. That's how I try to live my life, But politics is different. How should the country be ran? And so when I explain myself politically, I usually say in this order that I'm a populist and then libertarian adjacent and then conservative. And that's the order of importance. So when I say populist, I mean that we have a corrupt system that doesn't give a shit about the will of the people. And so that influences my political takes more than the next belief, which is that we should have as limited as a government as possible. Clearly, you can see how those two things are adjacent, but that's the order of priority for me. And then lastly is conservative. And by conservative, I mean sort of Christian values, fiscal conservatism. That theme of smaller government runs through all three of those, but you can see the nuanced differences. And so there are like, I don't believe that every sin should be illegal. Like you shouldn't have to face a civil penalty or a crime for lying. But is lying a sin? Yes. But if I lie to my wife and say, yeah, I'll be up in 10 minutes, and then I stay up all night playing Xbox, and I know I was going to do it, and I just lied to her, is that a crime? Well, no. But it's a sin. Lying's a sin.
Well, so, lying can be a sin or a crime if you commit fraud.
Well, yeah, sure. There are certain levels. But what I'm saying is, right, if you
little white lies.
Right. You can't just, for me, I don't just look at my interpretation of the Bible and what's sin or not and say, there you go, there's your code of law. Correct. And I think even Andrew I've talked to would agree with this. Like, for example, Andrew would be against gay marriage, but he's not for out criminalizing being gay. So it's not like you go to prison if you're gay.
Yeah, I'm in that same boat. I think that again, I'm not real, I'm not a theologist. I don't, I'm not that, but I would think that that's really the wrong way to go. But on the other side of that, I wouldn't endorse it either. Right. Like I'm fairly like, hey, you do you'll answer for it or not. None of my business.
Well, for me,
I'm a big none of my business guy, right?
That's like sort of how I am. And for me,
like I don't really give a shit what my neighbor does at all. I don't care. He could have a sweatshop over there with a bunch of Vietnamese or whatever kids making Nike shoe knockoffs. I wouldn't give a shit unless it walked into my yard.
Yeah, and that's basically how I feel. For me, I think the natural state of things is that culture is more influential than politics, right? Mm-hmm. The problem is our political system's corrupt, right? And it's too big.
Yes.
Which is why I put myself as a populist and libertarian adjacent first, because I think if that level of corruption was massively shrunk and the size of government was massively shrunk, the way you solve most of the problems were for example, take an issue of birth rates. Solving birth rates won't be as simple as like, well, people can't afford babies. So for example, if we give everyone $30,000 a year to have kids, there we go, we're good. But that doesn't get to the fundamental root cause. The fundamental root cause is sort of a secular belief in life and that you value materialism. Because here's the truth. I think all of you out there should get married and have kids, find a loving husband or wife, have kids. I think you'll be much happier for it. But if you're deciding to have children because it will be financially beneficial to you, you're screwing up massively because kids are expensive. And even if there are unique situations, you're the farmer that needs another farmhand, so you have a kid. There are far more oftentimes than not that's not the case. And so if you're relying on saying, we'll make having kids financially profitable, it's going to be incredibly difficult. The argument for having kids has nothing to do with materialism and with money. It has to do with a more profound truth that the love you get from, raising your own child with a partner that you're married to in the eyes of God is incomparable to anything else you could experience in life. It's better than buying a yacht. It's better than flying first class all around the world and staying at 5-star hotels, right? But the problem is we've adapted this cultural sort of materialist secular view of the world, and that's how young people grow up thinking. Now, I'm not saying that you want to live in poverty and you can't afford food. Like, of course, that sucks. You should always strive to get out of that. But so many successful people, myself included, like I'm lower middle class, but you're always thinking like,
yeah, I've heard you talk about your job and all of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I probably make close to $100,000 a year. I'm the only income in my family. I have a wife and a son, but that's because I average about 80 to 90 hours a week. I make, I think, $21 an hour is what I make. So I have to work an insane amount of hours to get that level of money, but it's enough to live. It is. But I'm always thinking of the next thing. Oh, if we just had this much money, then I could get this. And some of that stuff, like we need new windows in my house. Okay, you could say, I get that. I get why that would be a priority. But you fall into these traps where it's like you're never happy. The grass is always a little greener one step away, you know. And when you step back and think about it, like this weekend, I get to hang out with my son all week. That'll be better than any trip I could take. And so, you know, I guess what I'm trying to say here then is, although there is changes that we need to make politically, I think most of those changes have to do with getting the government out of so much shit and ending the corruption that we see. Once that occurs, the other side, conservatives can't rely on the government to push their values. That's a mistake. Instead, they should be living a life in which influences culture to the point where people make those decisions for themselves. It's not a panacea. It's almost like I said nothing there. Yeah, no shit. But for me, that's truly the best example I could give. I became a Christian. I was an atheist. I went to a church where they thought they could handle snakes and shit. They were Pentecostal. It really soured me on religion in my younger years. I was an atheist. And what changed me from being an atheist wasn't logic. It wasn't people convincing me. It was watching people that were living good lives that were Christian and me saying, I want that. That was my first step to becoming a Christian, where I saw, like, I was drinking all the time and then I saw, wait a minute, there's a better way to live life. I see these people, they're not faking it, right? These are really happy people. And what is it that they have that I don't? And that's what led me to Christianity. So.
Yeah, I've actually listened to a lot of your show, Rob. As a matter of fact, I was driving back from New York a couple of weeks ago after DebateCon, and you were I was listening to your show, and you were talking about how you got into your career, and the first, I think one of the first clients you had was just a handful and beat you up and broke the car window out on the side of the road.
It's crazy,
and all this craziness, and you were one of the only guys that would actually go to the guy's funeral, and then they wouldn't let you, and all that was crazy. That was nuts. And so I'm listening to all of this, and I get a real, and I'm I don't know. I'm a little different sort of person. So I was listening to it, and I'm like, this is why Rob really gets a lot of this stuff. To be honest, from my point of view, is because you work with people that need a lot of help, and that in theory, all of these tax dollars are being spent, all of this money is being spent, and yet look at how, obviously, you're not paid poorly, but you're not paid well, right? And, there's, and I was listening to all of the things that, you talked about. And I thought that was a really interesting dynamic. When my first job, so I have a degree in psychology, and I did a double major in psychology and criminal justice, and I have a minor in philosophy. So I was going to go to law school. And so I worked with kids. My first job out of college, I worked with kids. Actually, I was still in college. And what was called a wilderness school, a wilderness program. And it was a version of something that the military schools in the area were doing, where in the military school in the summertime, we would, when the classes were out, we would go and live in tents and be, do small group tactics and things like that. And so that was military school, but the people I work for, this was like not mental health, but troubled kids, right? And some were private, some were put there by the state, or whatever. And these kids had like real fucking problems, dude. But they had never been out of the city ever. Like, I kid you not. There was this one kid that walked in and looked for the fucking light switch in a tent.
Yep.
Like it had never occurred to him that there was a place with no electricity.
It's tough.
Crazy.
I have a friend. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So it taught me a lot about just people and watching how they act and how they react and all of that. It really, it honestly was, I've always felt like my worst investment ever was my college degree. And I would have just learned a lot more if I had just gone to work with people that were, that I ended up working with for about 2 years, 3 years during college. And I should have just done that instead of going to college, because that taught me as much or more.
Yeah, my degree, particularly my master's degree, is worthless. I have a master's degree in speech communication. The classes I took for that, it was online. The classes were easier than like my 8th grade high school classes.
Oh, wow.
But I did like debate in college. I learned a lot from debate. In some senses, policy debate is the most worthless thing in the world. Like, you learn to talk like an auctioneer. You learn how everything leads to nuclear war. You learn how everything's racist, I guess. But you do learn a lot. You learn argument structure. You learn quick thinking. Because when people are talking as fast as humanly possible, all of a sudden they're making 15 arguments. You got to learn how you can make arguments against them. So I still use that today, right? Where it's like my mind, even if I'm almost to my detriment many times, like I'm rapid fire thinking all the time, like in the midst of a conversation, particularly an argument or a discussion where arguments very, like, it's a loaded term. People think argument's bad. Argument's not bad. Argument's good, right? Like, it could get bad, but it's good, and so it helped with a lot of that. But my degree was worthless. One of the, you mentioned sort of folks like that. I have a friend, my friend that I was talking about, that's going to be the godfather of my son. His job is he works for a school in a small city for students that had basically been kicked out of school for violence. And so this is a specialized school. And like the stories he'll tell me, like, yeah, there are kids that are unreachable. But there's a lot of kids that seem unreachable and then they're not. And then you start to realize, like, their parents don't care. They've never been outside of their little bubble. They maybe have 4 or 5 siblings. They fight every day of their life because that's the only way they can survive. And they've never seen someone that's just like cares about them, that's able to, articulate a path forward in life. Like, you can't just scream and yell or fight people. You can't do that. Like, there's a way to live life. And he's got great stories of people that he's worked with that ended up doing well in life. But then, for every one of those, there's a story where there was someone he really liked and it just didn't work. They ended up in jail, or their parents took them out of this school and stuff. So it does, it's ironic when people talk about privilege all the time. They talk about, you have white privilege, you have male privilege. My privilege is I grew up.
We'll get into that in a minute.
I probably grew up in the greatest country in the history of the world at a fantastic time to be born, with 2 parents that loved me. That makes me more lucky than 99.9% of everyone that's ever lived. And I'll be damned if I'm going to sit here and say, well, that guy's rich. Look at Elon Musk. He's got all this money. Look at this prince in, Dubai. Look how much money he has. Look what they could do. Yeah, I just don't care. Now, don't get me wrong. Everyone watching, I see your super chats. We'll get to them at the end. I'll take your money, and it will make me happy. I'm just saying, I'm not like some commie. I'll take money. Right?
Yeah, I have the TTS, so if you may see and hear that. Actually, one of my guys is right now saying, support the channel. I can't read them, but the TTS will. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So. Yeah. My policy is, if I'm on someone else's show, I never read the chats until the end. I don't mind if you do, or if you're thinking, but I think that we spend too much time in when I hear all this talk of privilege, maybe we'll move into this, but Jordan Peterson, he had a lot of good stuff to say circa 2016, 2018, and I remember watching this video of him where he was talking about this specific video. And I think this was at Harvard, but maybe it was Yale, but it was an Ivy League school. And this video will stick in my head for the rest of my life. And what it was this older gentleman who ended up being a professor, who was also a, I forget what they call them, like dorm resident, in certain dorms, they'd have professors that would, and so him and his wife were both this, and his wife wrote an op-ed in the Ivy League school paper saying, like, hey, maybe we shouldn't freak out on people like white people that dress up like Indians for Halloween. It's sort of in fun. We don't have to be perpetually, upset and victimized by everything. And these people are surrounding the husband, screaming at him. They're literally surrounding him. And they're just yelling at him. They're like, this is our home. Shut up. You have to listen to us. And I remember Jordan Peterson talking about this. And he's like, imagine this. By any objective member, every single one of those students are amongst the luckiest people that have ever lived. Like they clearly have intelligence enough that they were able to graduate and at least get into an Ivy League school, even if there's things like affirmative action. They're clearly wealthy enough to be able to do that. They are amongst a student population that probably is going to be the movers and shakers of the world for the next generation. They're going to Harvard or Yale. And yet still, that's not enough for them. They need what the rich and wealthy have always had, which is the power, the influence, the money. But they also have the one thing that the people that weren't in that group weren't, which is bitching about it. When you go where I'm from, right? I used to bartend in this little town called New Bethlehem. Every day, around 5 o'clock, all the fucking blue-collar workers would walk in. And you know what they did? They cracked open a beer, and they bitched about their job, and they bitched about their boss. And it's cathartic. It really is. I've been there. You're talking to dudes or ladies, and you're like, fuck my job, fuck my boss, he's a prick. But imagine that your boss is like, you can't do that. We get to bitch. And you're like, but what are you bitching about? You got all the money. You don't do all the grunt work I do. Shut up. You're victimizing me. That's what's occurring. These people that talk about privilege, and it's like, you're right. I do have privilege, but it's not what you think. I used to all the time in debate and policy debate. This shit would come up all the time. You know, you would have a radical black activist team, and the first question they would ask you after your speech every time, why haven't you acknowledged your privilege? So you'd be like, yeah, I'd stand up and give a 9-minute speech on why we need to end corn subsidies. And their first question to me is, why haven't you acknowledged your privilege? And they wanted you to be like, I'm sorry for being white, which 95% of people that they debated that were white would do, because you got a judge in the back of the room that's going to be a radical lefty. So you got to play the game, right? And so we would inevitably talk about whiteness, and I'd be like, can you define whiteness? Now, they knew they couldn't say that you were born white. It's a choice. It's a state of living. And when you really interrogate it, it's privilege, power, money. And so I would always come back to them like, oh, where do you go to school? Louisville. It's a very prestigious university. I go to Clarion University because it's the cheapest state school in Pennsylvania. I work at Burger King full-time to try to pay my way through this. My parents, I have a sister that's 20 years younger than me. My parents' furnace went out, so I couldn't afford to pay the electricity in my house this month because I had to help them buy a new furnace, right? I drive a 92 Cavalier that won't start when it's raining, and then I literally had to pinch the brake line because the brake line's leaking so bad. Like, what is my privilege again? Can you explain it to me? What do you drive? Well, I have a Porsche. Oh, you have a Porsche. Please tell me about how the world's victimized you. And they have no answer. You know, and then I would tell them.
It's an interesting thing, Rob. It's an interesting thing because I get this a lot. All right, so, and I don't know how much you know about me, so I'm going to give you a as quick a synopsis as I can. So I was actually I'm from Tennessee. I currently live in Tennessee. I grew up dirt poor. I mean the kind of poor where you wonder every month whether the lights are going to get turned off or not. Right, like or the water, or there's going to be a late notice for the rent. You know, you don't know what your parents are going to be going through that month, but it's as a kid, shit ain't right. And you go to the refrigerator and that shit's empty. And I got really fortunate, man. I got really fortunate. I competed for and won a scholarship to a military school.
That's awesome.
And didn't expect to win it. It was just one of those things where, a couple of teachers thought that I did well. I could write really well. I was reasonable at math. I was very good at science. And they said, hey, you should try and get this. I was like, yeah, why not? I got nothing better to do. I literally have nothing better to do. I don't have cable. I don't have, I got nothing, So I ended up my freshman year, I got accepted. My freshman year is actually doing okay. I worked a couple of jobs, kind of making my own way. Even at 14, I was kind of, I understood that nobody was going to give me anything. Mm-hmm. At 14, I knew that if I wanted something, I had to go earn it. Right? I had to do it. Like my parents, $0. So get in military school, and it was the most eye-opening experience that I can't even express the way it changed radically my outlook on almost everything. I am totally merit-based, and with me, it's pass or fail. Like, and failing is not like you're dead to me or anything. It's just like you failed. I'm sorry. Next. I've got to move on.
Do you mind asking? And how old are you? You don't have to tell me, but
I'm 53.
Okay, because I think there's more people of that belief in your generation, and it lowers as you go. I feel, but sorry, I didn't.
Probably does.
Yeah,
probably does. And so, but military school was really interesting, man. Like I said, every summer we would get kicked out of the dorms and go live in tents out in the fucking woods for 3 months. And we would build sweat lodges and it was a great experience. And it was all team building. And I never took debate in high school. I never took debate in college. I had mock trial in military school, and we worked in 10 student groups, teams. And if you did something wrong, you had to be able to defend why you did that. And you're defending it against really smart fucking people,
right?
Right? Like, these are not idiots. And so I came out of that experience. My brother went to a standard high school. My brother today, good man. He's had some problems in life. He's a welder. He makes $29 an hour, something like that. It's the best he's ever going to be.
Mm-hmm.
I paid $280,000 in taxes last year.
No kid. That's probably the amount of money I've seen in 10 years. And then
So
I went for my job with that story. You heard me talking about the violent guy that I worked with. I think if I remember, I was making $10.15 an hour. Yeah, is what I was making there. And then I was all excited. I got a promotion. I was making like $11.50. That's big money. It's weird though. Where I lived, I remember growing up, I had older cousins, and there's trailer factories here where they build modular homes. And that was like big deal. You started off with like $18 an hour there. And for me, that was rich. When I grew up and I saw, like, it was like, oh man, Eric graduated and he's a Commodore. He got hired at Commodore, making $18 an hour. Wow. And now it's like, through inflation, it's like, well, that ain't shit. But when I was a kid, man, that was it. That's what people in my area aspired to. People weren't aspiring to, like, no one here was aspiring. I mean, you may have a handful of people, but none of my family and friends were aspiring to, like, I'm going to become this high-powered lawyer. I'm going to make, 6 figures a year. It was like, dude, I'm gonna buy a house for $45,000. It's gonna be 3-bedroom. I'm gonna get married. I'm gonna go to church every Sunday. I'm gonna play in the church softball league, and I'm gonna work at the trailer factory making $20 an hour. And that was a happy life. It was. Do you
know how I did it? Do you know how I became a good human, other than church and military school and beating myself up for a number of years?
How's that?
So I got out of college. I had a degree that I didn't want to use because I hated being inside. I just never wanted to be in an office. And I had spent the summer. Well, my neighbor had this little race car, and he worked on it all the time, and I would help him with it. And I'm very mechanically minded, and so I'd help him with it. And I ended up, I get out of school. The first serious job I have, and I've never had an adult job. I worked for this shop doing restoration work, and which is terrible work. You work 8 hours and you like make a tail light look brand new.
Right.
You put 8 hours into a fucking tail light, and but it was good, and I was learning, and I ended up working at a Porsche specific racing shop out of North Carolina, and we did vintage racing, pro racing, club racing, all of it. And I worked for those guys, and I was making $500 a week, man. That was a lot.
That's awesome.
It was like the best, my best life ever. And I learned every skill that they would teach me: welding, composites, paint, body, engine, all of it. Anything I could do. And my entire mental process was, I'm going to own a shop doing this one day, and I'm going to make all the money. That's what I'm going to do. That's
awesome.
And so that's exactly what I did. And I ended up owning a race team. I owned a race shop.
Yeah, that's what, I think I could say his name. I don't think you've been. I was talking to Chickenfoot today.
Yeah.
And he was like, I told him I was talking to you. He's like, yeah, he like ran a racing team. I was
Yeah.
like, no kidding. That's
Yeah.
amazing. That's really cool.
It is so different, man. It's
My
like-
brother-in-law, there used to be this show, and it may have been called Trick My Truck. I can't remember, but the premise of the show was like these shows you see where they restore these cars and stuff like that you'll see on like, networks. This was doing like tractor trailers, and the shop was in Joplin, the shop that the show was based on.
Mississippi, yeah.
Okay. And so my brother-in-law went to work at that shop like a year after that show closed down. And now he works in a different shop in Louisiana, but he does trucks that enter these like truck shows, and he's had a lot of success with it. And like, you're absolutely right when you're talking about restoration work. That dude works like 20-hour days. Like that is a guy that is like I'll see him over Christmas, and he's like, I'm like, hey man, nice to see family. He's like, sleep's nice. It's like, I hear you, man. He's like, oh, I actually get to sleep.
I have so many crazy stories about the stuff that we did because coming out of military school, I had this really weird idea of what life is supposed to be like, because of the just the culture that you're bred in is like there is no fail. You can't do things fast enough, right? Like, I don't care how fast we could clean up the shower room. They would next time they push us to do it even faster, right? And it was just it was all merit based, right? And it was instant pass fail. If you fail, you had to run a bunch of fucking laps, And,
well, that's I mean, so listen, I won't be so harsh. Again, I'm sort of stealing this from Jordan Peterson, right? Life is hierarchies, but the beauty of our world is there's almost infinite hierarchies. You will find something that you're good at, but you're not going to be good at everything. The problem is when we try to use equity and we equalize outcomes, what happens is you disincentivize the people that are working hard. The single most influential moment in my life that didn't come from my family, so not getting married, not the birth of my son, all that stuff obviously more important, and there are things with my like deaths that I've had in my family or stuff like that, but as far as a moment, with my third year in debate, I got pretty good, and I was at the highest level of collegiate debate, and the goal was to qualify for this tournament, which I don't believe a state school had ever qualified for, called the National Debate Tournament. It's like the NCAA basketball tournament. So that was the goal. And there's several ways that you could get there. You could get like basically a bid, which means you're one of the top 16 teams in the country. Then you could get what's called a second round, which is if you don't qualify in the other way, they'll invite you. We weren't good enough for either of those. So we had the third option. The third option was there's a district tournament, and you have to place in like the top like 15 to 25% of that tournament to go. So at the district tournament, it was like in my head, like life was a fiction. And it was like I was watching like Rocky, where there's this montage where I'm busting my ass. I'm preparing every night. I know that I'm not the smartest person. My partner knows we're not the smartest people. So we have this mentality. We're going to outwork everyone. And we did. We worked our ass off like crazy. And then you're like, well, what happens? You win, right? No, we lost.
Yeah.
And we had to drive back. That tournament was at a college called Mary Washington University, sort of near DC. And so we have this like 8 to 10 hour drive back home, and it sucks because it's like this huge balloon's been deflated. You tried so hard and you fail. You have nothing to show for it. Hours upon hours upon hours upon hours. You had this one goal and you fail. And I remember just sitting quietly on that ride home for like an hour thinking to myself, like, this is the greatest thing that ever happened to me, because now I know life isn't a movie. It's not. Sometimes you work hard and you lose. So what will I do? What will my reaction be? And the reaction was we busted our ass, and the next year we made it. But maybe we wouldn't have. That's okay too, right? Yeah. That's the point. And if it would have just been handed to you, let's say they said, you know what, instead of taking 72 teams this year, we're going to take 300. So you made it. It wouldn't have meant anything. It would have meant nothing. It would have been like, oh, so I failed, but I get a consolation prize, so I get to go. Yeah. So to me, that moment where it was like, life doesn't just hand you stuff. Sometimes you try hard and you lose, but that just means when you make it, it's all the more important. And I've tried to stick with that like my whole life. Everybody thinks that like you're entitled to something. You're just not. You're not. And it just because you're the good person. People do this in politics all the time. Our side's right. Conservatives will win. Populism will win. We're going to win. Maybe
we will.
Not. Maybe you won't. Maybe you'll lose.
That's
you know?
that's excellent. Or let me. So one of the things, why military school, or at least the school I went to, which by the way no longer exists, because in the Great Purge of the early '90s, when literally every one of them was being accused of having, some, homo teacher, doing weird stuff, which the school been around for like, I don't know, 50 or 80 years, and all of a sudden, this is, I don't know, whatever. I never saw any of it while I was there. Maybe I was an idiot. I don't know. But anyway, one of the things that being in that environment taught me is that you are going to fucking fail.
Mm-hmm.
It has literally nothing prevents that. You can work as hard. You can have the best preparation. You can have the best equipment. You can be in the best shape of your life, and you can still fucking fail.
Yeah.
It's what you do that 10 seconds after you fail that matters, right? Because now you've realized you failed. What do? Do you sit there and cry like a bitch?
And you think about,
or do you move on?
You think about this life. You don't know anyone in life that hasn't faced significant adversity. Everyone you know has had a loved one die, or had some sort of illness, or had a terrible injury, or got fired, or grew up in poverty. Right. Everyone. There's no one in the world that doesn't have a story like. And if somehow they do, someone they know is going to die eventually. That's life. So the question is, do you sit there and you complain because your hand you got dealt was worse than someone else's and say the world owes you something? Or do you just say, like, all I could control is what I can control, is how I react to this stuff? And one of the things that I say, it's amazing to me working with adults with like autism and disabilities. Everyone's different. Don't get me wrong. So don't think that I'm saying, oh, all people that are autistic are this. I'm not saying that. But the overwhelming majority of the people that I've worked with, when you talk to them about the things that they really want out of life, it's like, I want a job. I want friends. I want a girlfriend. I want to see my family a lot. And like, you know how many people I know that don't suffer 1/100th of the adversity of these people, that through no fault of their own were born with significant challenges because of their medical diagnosis, and they don't want to work, right? All they want to do is sit around and play video games and grumble about how life's been unfair to them. And then you see these people that if anyone had the right to complain, it's someone who was born with autism, that's 55 years old, and they were put in a facility for 30 years where they're treated like crap, basically like a prisoner. You wouldn't believe the stories that you hear these people. And yet some of the most upbeat, honest, hardworking people you'll ever meet. And to me, that always taught me a lesson. It's like, who am I to complain? Who am I to sit around and talk about my bad lot? And so, I think that I see so many people in my area where I live that maybe their life didn't end up in a good way. Maybe they got addicted to drugs, or maybe, they just fell into sort of, this trap of life's not fair to me. I grew up in a poor, impoverished area where drugs were prevalent, and it's not fair to me. And it's like, the only difference I see between them and me is like, I tried to be like, okay, that's true. Now what? Now what do I do? Right? Do I just sit here and I just wallow in it? Or do I say, you know what? And I'm not perfect. I screw up every day, all the time. I got lucky. I met a woman that I want to spend the rest of my life with, who I think's amazing. I had a kid born who's awesome and healthy. But every day I realize, like, this is the best day of my life. This is the best time of my life. I'm going to get older. My body's going to fall apart. More people I know are going to die. My son's eventually going to get older and leave, and he won't look up to me like he does right now at 4 years old. Who am I to complain? Like, this is it. And I'm going to complain now, today, when today's the best day I've ever had to be alive. And so, I don't know. For me, that's the mindset that I try to go through life, where it's like, what do I have to complain about? But, YouTube shadow bans conservatives like us. Yeah, I guess. I'm still kicking away, like, what are you going to do?
The most successful people I ever met. Right. And obviously, at one point in time, I was working with very, very high end wealthy people who did whatever they fucking wanted to do. So I got to watch the reality that, what I'd seen in military school was say, no matter what, there's always that possibility of failure. What matters is that the few minutes after the failure, and what do you do about it? And then, and further, how do you continue forward? And then what working in the racing industry taught me is we are going, not only are we going to fail, we're going to fail in spectacular fashion, right? Usually publicly. And I mean, you think about, and this is a kind of, when people ask me, how do I have such balls to say the things I have literally walked up to a guy that has written a check for $50,000 to be at a race and told him that there's no fucking way he's going because we physically cannot get it done. And even if we got it done, it wouldn't fucking work. And I'm not going to do it. The ink's not even dry on a check yet. And I'd tell him that. And then we would have guys that had paid that kind of money, and we would get to the track and they make 6 laps or 10 laps, bend the car, blow the engine, whatever. And we're like, yep, we're done. End of the weekend. First day, first 20 minutes, you know? And so on the one side of it was that, you know, where you're literally telling people who are corporate giants who are never told no. In theory, you're not only you're telling them no, you're telling them, hey, you fucked up the car, and we can't fix it, right? And so that takes a big set of balls. But then the other side of that is, you know, we would bend a car, blow an engine, whatever, and if we could fix it, we would. And we had this deal where we were getting ready to go to Sears Point, which is in California, and we were in Denver at the time. And the day before we're supposed to leave, we're doing a test session at a local racetrack, and the driver comes in and motor's shot. Like, it's just fucked. We rolled the car into the trailer. We went back to the shop. We gathered every engine part that we had, put it in the trailer, all the tools, engine stand, engine crane, everything. And we drove 36 hours straight from Denver to Sears Point, which is above San Francisco. Unloaded the car, took the blown engine out, put another engine in, went out on track. That engine let go because the engine that we took out had put metal in the oiling system. So that engine let go. Brought it back, FedExed in all new oil coolers, oil lines, filters, everything. FedExed that in for next day. Stole an engine from a race team that was there. I literally called them up and I said, hey man, I'm going to come over and we'll steal an engine. And they're like, you what? And I'm like, yeah, I need an engine right now. I'll get it back to you someday, but I'm coming over. I'm getting an engine out of your shop. And I'm like, it doesn't even have to be a good one. We have to build it to fit our car. They're like, okay, come on. And he came out and I went over there and he had a line of engines on pallets for me to choose from. So when I say I stole it, it was with permission, guys. It was with permission.
Right.
but I took the.
They're still looking for you. They're going to watch this.
Still looking for me, yeah. And so we went down and we set up tables, and I built the engine in the paddock at Sears Point. I had a crowd of people watching me build this engine. Put the engine in the car, and the car ran the race. And to my knowledge, that engine is still running today somewhere else. Yeah, and it was because if we can make it happen, we're going to make it happen. There's no amount of money we could at that point. It didn't matter how much money, it didn't matter how much effort. All it really mattered was what we could do in a specific amount of time. And that's why my mentality, my attitude is different than other people's just because of that. And
it's like what you're saying there about, like, it's such a difficult trait to be willing to talk to people of a high stature, we'll say, as an equal. You know, I learned it from my family, from my dad and my grandpa, that sort of had this mentality that was like, no one's better than you, but you're not better than anyone else. And I also saw it through debate, where you would have these situations where I was probably the only debater at the national level, at the highest level, that would ask my coach, like, we didn't travel. We stayed sort of in the East Coast. So you would go to these big tournaments. You're debating some team from Kentucky. You're debating some team from, Dallas, UT Dallas or something. And I don't know them. So I would ask my coach, are they better than me? And at first he'd be like, oh, you could beat anyone. I'm like, well, I know that, but are they better? And he'd be like, yeah, they're a better team than you, but that's okay. I just wanted to know the truth. And so for me, I've been at Republican events where I'm talking to my senator, where I ran for Congress. I'm giving a speech in front of, all the representatives in Pennsylvania that are Republican in the area. And I'm sort of like naturally not intimidated, because to me, those people are no better than the guy that when I'm bartending back in the little town that I'm from, that goes to work 10 hours a day, 5 days a week to feed his family. And he's telling me something. That guy's impressive, So, one story I have like that is I got a picture of me shaking Dr. Oz's hand at this Republican event when he was running against John Fetterman. So I'm waiting in line to talk to Dr. Oz, and he's got this assistant. And he says, "Hey, you got a phone on you. You want me to take a picture of you with Dr. Oz?" I said, "Sure." So he takes a picture of me shaking Dr. Oz's hand. And what I said to Dr. Oz was, "I don't like you at all, and I think you were a terrible pick. I'm still going to vote for you, and I'm going to encourage people to vote for you. But I don't think you get what it means to be a rural Pennsylvania, and I don't think that you get our values. I hope that you prove me wrong." And it was funny because I later found myself talking to one of the state officials of the Republican Party, and they're like, "I can't believe you said that." And I was like, "Why not?" Like, there's a way to do it. I wasn't like, "Hey, F you suck." I just told him my feelings. And for me, it was like, well, why is that guy any more special than the guy that's handed out food? That's a conservative that goes to church every Sunday. That's like, to me, there's something to learn from everyone. Now, clearly there are people that are outside that scope, serial killers, child assaulters, that sort of, but in general, I think that if you really look, you'll understand that we're all just people. You don't have to get shell shocked, and so it's difficult because even in our position, like Grid, you were talking to in that debate with that Charlie person.
Yeah.
A lot of what we do on here, it's like, my view is this: if you enter the foray with me in a debate on one of these things, the most respectful thing I could do for you is to treat you as an equal.
Yes.
If you're obviously an idiot, I'm going to call you out on that, just like I would someone who's really smart that I'm debating, because you've entered the foray, and I'm not going to do the indignity of treating you like a child or treating you like, I'm going to go at you just like I would go at anyone that was really good. That's it. But outside this, you have to understand there's some performative nature to that, but mostly that's just, I think, the implicit agreement that all of us that put ourselves out there go by. We're going to treat everyone, if you enter this, that's different than when I talk to people in real life that I know barely follow politics. I'm not hostile to them, even if they have opinion that, well, Trump's worst, he's a racist, he's a sexual assaulter, he's this. I'll be like, well, I know. Yeah, I don't try to be confrontational in that sense, because
that's actually exactly why I was on. Gibbs told me he needed a conservative. He called me a righty.
There you go.
We'll go with it.
It's even better, yeah.
He needed a righty that could talk to people without necessarily being overly aggressive. And I measure myself out. And honestly, that was such a weird debate. I'm air quoting there because it wasn't a fucking debate. But it was so weird that I was just fun for me. I was literally it was one-liners all night, more or less. Except, and one of the things, we can talk about, just weird stuff for a minute. One of the things that I find really interesting is whatever, he brought up, or somebody brought up the 94 treaty with Ukraine and the U.S. that we were to support them if they gave up their nukes. And I said, the problem is that the ink wasn't even dry on the treaty, and the oligarchs and the gangsters were trying to sell nuclear submarines and nuclear missiles to anybody that would fucking pick up the tab. And that broke the treaty. The treaty it didn't even last a year. But we still held up our end. They never held up their end. We had to force them. We literally, remember, we sent peacekeepers into Ukraine, 95, 6, whatever, to make sure that they actually, that's right, the Budapest Treaty, that's correct, actually put nukes into or sent the nukes to Russia. And it was just really disingenuous because they use that they only tell you part of the story, right? And they're like, well, there's a treaty. Well, if they don't abide by the treaty, is there a treaty? Why are we upholding our end? They didn't uphold their end. They were literally, and so the first thing Wick goes is like, you got a citation on that? And I'm like, I'm not going to go look back at 1994.
Well, even that, like, if you read, I have to do more research on this, but if you look at that 94 agreement, it's very vague in what defending means. It's almost
just support.
Right. And so, like, there's nothing really written that says if there's a physical invasion, like what occurs. There's all sorts of problems with this as well. Like, are we talking about the people of Ukraine or the leadership of Ukraine? For example, if I could show evidence that the leadership of Ukraine was supporting the Azov battalion that was killing ethnic Russian-speaking people in, say, 2019, were we obligated to defend those Russian-speaking people? Or is it just that we're obligated to defend the government of Ukraine from outside incursions? Because Russia also signed that agreement, right? So then
Yes,
does Russia... If Russia thinks that we engaged in the coup, the Maidan revolution, to overthrow the government of Ukraine, are they obligated to intervene because they view the United States as an outside aggressor, funding people that are committing active violence and a violent overthrow of the government, right? When it gets right down to it, it's sort of, well, it was an implicit agreement. I don't disagree with the mentality of that. You give up your nukes, we'll make sure people don't fuck with you. The problem was, as soon as you go back previous 3 years to that in 1991, where the United States had this implicit agreement to the Soviet Union, listen, if you dissolve the Soviet Union, we won't expand westward or eastward, right?
Correct.
With NATO. What they say is, yeah, but that wasn't written down in a treaty. That wasn't written down. It was just a verbal comment. It was never memorialized in a treaty. Well, the same could be said of the 94 nuclear agreement as well. So the truth is, and then you get into other things, like, for example, what if Ukraine decided that they were just going to bomb the shit out of, like, Belarus, and then Belarus fights back? Are we treaty obligated to defend Ukraine in that situation? That's one of the problems, by the way, with this idea of a security guarantee, right? If we would give what Zelensky's suggesting, right? Let's say we give in and we say, okay, a precursor to peaceful negotiations and a ceasefire with Russia is Russia knowing that no matter what, the NATO umbrella now extends over Ukraine. So once this conflict is over, if there's ever an invasion by Russia to Ukraine again, you've basically now gone to war with all of NATO. Okay? Let's say that occurs. Now, am I the only person that remembers the following two events? The bombing of the Nord Stream pipeline, which now the official narrative is it was Ukraine. My money's still on U.S. intelligence or Western intelligence. Nonetheless, the official story is it's Ukraine, but Ukraine denied it for like months, right? Yeah. And then remember when Poland got a missile dropped on them? You remember that? And Zelensky came out and was like, oh my God, that was Russia. And you had all these people go, oh, that's an act of war now.
It's true.
Against NATO. That's an act of war against NATO. We got to trigger Article 5. And then it turned out it wasn't Russia. It was Zelensky. It was Ukraine. So if we enter this security guarantee, what's to stop some sort of attack from happening in Ukraine that ends up not being from Russia, but Zelensky says, yeah, it was Russia. Now you got to go to war. And what's to stop our intel agencies that have wanted a proxy war with Russia for the past 2 decades from saying, yep, that's the truth? When you stop and think about it, what do we really know? Right? And when you see obvious bullshit that they're lying about, like remember when Biden came out and said, if Russia would invade, then that Nord Stream pipeline will stop. And they were like, what do you mean it'll stop? Like, I'm just telling you it'll stop. Then Russia invades and the pipeline gets blown up. And the United States, Biden administration's like, of course, it's a conspiracy theory to even suggest we had anything to do with it. So the idea, like, what do you really know? Like, what does all of these people you're on the panel with, what do they really know about what's going on in Ukraine right now? Right? I'll be the first to admit, I don't know what to believe. I see videos of press gangs beating the shit out of men and throwing them in black vans, and I'm told that's Zelensky's team beating the shit out of people to force them to go fight in the front. Maybe that's true. But then the other side says, no, Zelensky's massively popular, 70 to 80% approval. Everybody loves him. We had a story today that turned out to be nothing that's been confirmed, but there's a story out there that apparently part of the rolling back of the Biden administration's refugee status would make eligible for 250,000 Ukrainians to be sent back to Ukraine, right? And you see all these people on the left that are gnashing their teeth and howling, et cetera, et cetera. Now, we're at the early stages of that. It's just being talked about. Maybe there'll be a cutout for Ukrainians. Who knows? But it didn't stop the pro-Ukrainian people from freaking out, as always. My question is, okay, let's take women and children out of it. How many of those 250,000 are fighting age men? Right? Weren't they all drafted? So
that's an interesting point. Yeah.
So wait a minute.
They weren't allowed to leave. They couldn't cross the border.
That's right. People that committed crimes against Zelensky's government by illegally leaving the country will now be set back. Is that the story here? And I thought everyone in Ukraine wanted the war. So why are there people fleeing? I thought they wanted to fight to the last man. Women and children, fine. I understand that argument. But the men why should we be supporting them leaving? Isn't the good pro-Ukrainian thing to do to say, get your ass back there and grab a rifle? So that logically, they just accept this hook, line, and sinker. But Russia's evil, and you're pro-Putin if you're not for literally contributing to this endless war. Like, if it's really a moral imperative that we stop Russia now, then why don't these people suggest United States and NATO boots on the ground? Why not? Why are we just giving them enough to make sure Ukrainians die by scores?
I had a great experience watching that pentuplet guy and average debate enjoyer.
They're good. Both of them
those two were literally, and myself, of course, were literally telling all the lefties that they just want more blood. Like, they're bloodthirsty. Like, they can't wait to keep more men in the meat grinder. Right? Like, they just can't wait. They get a gleam in their eye, and we're like, you guys are like terrible. You're war hawks. And we're not. No, we're not war hawks.
Everything they say, it like contradicts. Like, I saw today, lefty people, I can't remember who it was, that were like, oh, like, now there are people saying that, like, NATO, that if NATO was there, that would stop Russia, but it wouldn't, because Trump would just not do anything anyways. He wouldn't trigger it. Okay, then what's the claim with the security guarantee then? Because basically your argument is, even if Trump would agree to a security guarantee, he would violate it anyways. So Russia's not going to give a shit, and they're going to consider it. Then I saw someone write a big thread on about how actually Russia's a bunch of sissies. Trump's under the impression that they're these real tough guys, but actually their economy's falling apart and the military shit. Then you're like, oh, okay. Well, then I guess the claim they're going to storm through Europe if they take over Ukraine is bullshit. No. They're just in the Goldilocks scenario where they're weak enough that we never have to worry about it as long as we continue to send money to Ukraine forever and allow Ukrainian men to die. But if we stop that, then they're strong enough to take over the entirety of Europe. Isn't that what a claim? And it's constantly this bullshit where they're talking out of both sides of their mouth. Like, I talked to Dylan Burns, who is on the ground there and probably knows more about the on-the-ground situation than me, although it's coming from what I would say is a biased place. Nonetheless, he told me that at best, if Ukraine falls, Russia may get into Moldova. That was his claim. But simultaneously, I watched Lindsey Graham on television saying, we have to fight them over there so we don't fight them over here. Well, Moldova's not over here. So what is this claim? And they really don't have an answer.
Well, I got to talk to you about. We'll get to that in just a minute. But before we do, let me ask you, man. Seriously, why is nobody talking about the fact that if and only if Russia could do something and actually take over, totally defeat and occupy Ukraine? Let's just say that could happen. Why is nobody talking about that they'd have to deal with Poland? And Poland is armed to the teeth. It is literally like it's Texas it's European Texas right now.
They wouldn't go into Poland. Everybody knows it. They know.
Nobody's going to go into Poland, bro. Right. like Poland's the gatekeeper, right? Like, they try and come out of Ukraine. Poland's right there. They'd be like, no, you can't do it.
To still man their position, it would go something like this. Well, once they take over Ukraine and all of the Western world decides to just allow it, then they'll build up their military for the next 20, 30 years. And then they'd be able to get, that's what the argument, but it's a joke. Everybody knows it's not the case.
Yeah, I think your chat's right, that the leftists can't point to Poland on a map.
They couldn't. And I don't consider myself to be geographically amazing, but I looked this up one day. I was like, what were the nearest like military bases with missiles from the Western world to Russia at the time of the invasion? And I forget, it was like 110 miles. where there was
Yeah.
a Western military base with like missiles. And it's like, you think about that. Imagine just on the other side of the Rio Grande, like China's got a base there with missiles.
Right.
We don't have to imagine. We had the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Now we got to talk about this. I have this whole thing, man. I have this whole thing about, because I am an isolationist. I don't believe that we should be the world police. I don't believe that the American taxpayer should be burdened with the defense of all of Europe, a lot of Asia, and the rest of the damn world. I just don't. I just don't think that's the case. It shouldn't be the truth, and we, I mean, I don't know why, but we seem to be that way. And everyone says, "Well, do you want China to go nuts?" I'm like, why would China go nuts if we just make America stronger? How does that hurt us? There's still a fucking ocean there. Well, we need those bases, Rob, as force projection, so that everybody knows that we're the badasses, and we can strike the world over, and we can protect Australia from China. We can protect Taiwan because we have a base in the Philippines. Why does that fucking matter? Well, China is, and actually they say we can't be a superpower without those foreign bases. And yet China is a superpower with 0 foreign bases. 0.
It's an old mentality, right? First off, after World War II, you basically had this agreement where the United States was like the sole superpower standing, because anyone that could rival us, whether it be the Soviets, whether it be the European countries, their land and people were ravaged by war. The United States was in a unique position where there was, other than Pearl Harbor, there was no conflict or bloodshed in the country of the United States. The United States was already becoming a production superpower, a cultural superpower. Certainly they were there anyways. But after that, there was an agreement that was made that was basically like, the United States will become the world reserve currency, and the United States will basically become the world police. And that came with advantages and disadvantages for the United States. And so there was this mentality that like, well, what that will allow is basically the old world, the European empire, to continue to be an empire with the United States as sort of their enforcer. And so you could project power all across the world in ways that would benefit the American people and potentially the European people, right? So for example, there was this motto, what's good for GM is good for the American people, good for the American worker. And the idea was, if you open up a country to sort of resource development and, capitalism, then that will benefit companies like GM that will build plants back home, and that will help the country of America. And that worked. It did work. The problem was that agreement changed, right? Now GM's not building plants in the United States. They're outsourcing it to Mexico or to India or other places like, wherever. I don't know India specifically, but you get the idea. And so what's the American people really get through this power projection? What do they get? What do they get through the United States? What is our primary export? Dollars. We're the world reserve currency. That's what our primary export. So what does that mean? Well, we're in a position now that if we were to end up in a world war, it would probably be against a coalition of countries, the leader of which would be China, and we would be reliant on China to create the ammo that we needed to fight China. Or if China releases a deadly disease in collaboration with the United States, but anyways, and we need protective equipment, we have to go to China to get the protective equipment to protect us from the disease that was released by China. Because we have gutted manufacturing in the United States. What's the growing industries in the United States? Finance. Shifting money around, not creating money. And where does finance get its money from? From siphoning money from all of these more productive areas. Manufacturing, education, other sorts of places like that. So what is the argument for the United States being the world police at this point when it comes to benefiting the people of the United States? Right? Like, why wouldn't we be better off? We have an open border that's leading to hundreds of thousands of people a year dying of fentanyl in our country. We have millions of people crossing the border illegally, and yet we're interested in power projection with some 400 bases in countries around the world. What's the benefit that we're getting? Halliburton gets a benefit. They certainly do. Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, they're benefiting mightily. The politicians that get lobbied to by those groups, they're benefiting mightily. But how's I'll tell you what I know about my area. The factory that was here, Owens, Illinois, that was a glass plant. Yeah, that shit closed down like 15, 20 years ago, right? My area gets poorer and poorer and poorer every year. That's what happens. The middle class that used to be available to sort of people like me and you that came from areas that, were poor, those are closing. They're closing. And now we're getting a bifurcated lower class and upper class, and the middle class is disappearing. And they're wiping out the idea of a nation state.
Middle class has disappeared, Rob.
Well, right. They want, and now the next step is the biggest impediment to what they really want is globalism. They don't want to deal with nation states. They want a block. And so once you realize that, what's the biggest impediment? Well, it's like the working class and the middle class in first world countries, particularly the United States. And so what's some ways that you could do that? Well, you crush small businesses by having regulations that are designed to benefit sort of massive corporations. You have lockdowns where you tell mom and pop hardware stores, sorry, you're non-essential, you have to close down. But you can go to Home Depot. It'll be open. Walmart will be open, which led to one of the largest transfers of wealth from the poor and working class to the upper class in the history of our country. You have open borders. You erode national identity. You say that people are just cogs in a machine. It's not that they have a connection to their foundational documents or to the historic ancestors that were in a place or even to the geographic land. What's it matter? It's just a place to live. You could move person A to country B. What's it matter? It's all the same. There's no cultural differences. That's the mentality that these people have, and being the world police is part and parcel to that. So I say, even if you make an argument that the United States should be the world police, in theory, that could be correct. The problem is the people that would be in charge of that are running our military-industrial complex, they are neither moral people nor are they competent people. And so that ship has sailed. Why don't we focus on securing our country and making our own people proud and benefiting them? And once we do that for years and years, if the leadership can prove that they're moral and competent, then we could have the debate, which I think you still should lose, that the United States should be the world police. That's my feelings on it.
Yeah, so I'm actually going to have that debate with the average debate enjoyer. He thinks that he's got it, that he can support globalism. I've always been kind of an isolationist. I've never understood. I never understood why we send troops all over the world and nobody else does. I've never understood why England no longer has a standing army. I don't understand why they barely have a navy. I don't understand why Germany and France are in the same boat.
They have free health care.
Right.
You don't have to pay for your
military. Right. Because they subsidize. That's right. They subsidize their defense budget to us. We paid their defense budget. And worse, Rob, I don't know if you realize this. If you look, it's not hard to find. You will find that every single country in the EU, with the possible exception of Switzerland, but I think they're on the take now too, and Poland. Poland doesn't take any money from us. Every country in the EU takes money from the U.S. in aid, grants, and loans that they never pay back. So why is the American taxpayer is literally carrying the weight of the world?
We've gutted our middle class, and who's benefited? Globalists around the world. Who's paid in the United States? It's been the middle class. It's not the wealthy. They've done just fine. There's a
even the wealthy. Look, Rob, I know that people love to hate the wealthy in the U.S., but they met more new millionaires in China in a month than we do in a year.
Right.
Like don't even. That's the worst argument. A fucking communist country has more new millionaires in a year than the capitalist country in the world.
You should watch this guy. His name is Luke Grumman, and he did an episode of Tucker Carlson. This was from last week, from February 24th, so more than last week.
While you're looking that up, so one of the things, because I was doing business in China for a while when I had one of the shops, and my wife is Chinese, so I kind of get a little bit different take on it. It's crazy how things work there. You want to be in business with the government. You want to be in business with them, because if you're in business with the government, not only do you get the contracts, do you get the loans that you need, do you get everything that you need to operate, they want you to succeed. They want you to make money, which is the exact opposite trait here in the United States. If you go into business with the government, you're screwed. You're done. You're screwed. I mean, you're absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's crazy, you know, and nobody wants to be in business with the government because they know that they're going to lose their ass.
This guy, Luke Grumman, you should watch this interview from February 24th. He starts off, he's like a gold bug. He's talking about why you should invest in gold and stuff.
Sure.
But I'm going to oversimplify what he says, and certainly I'm not an expert on this, but his argument is that right now, one of the worst kept secrets is all of this gold's flowing into the United States. Like behind the scenes, tons of gold being sold to the United States, and the United States is sort of picking up like almost at unprecedented levels. The question is why? And he's like, people are saying it's because of tariffs, right? And the idea is, tariffs will mean that there'll be an effect on the dollar, and so you're going to want real wealth in the United States backed by something. But he's like, I think it's something else. He's like, I think the longer that you see this gold coming in, that what's happening is that. And he says in particular, it's J.D. Vance. He's like, if you listen to J.D. Vance talk to Jerome Powell in 2023, he talks about the crisis of the dollar. And he's like, how has the dollar being the world reserve currency benefited people like in my rural towns? How has that benefited them? I understand how it's benefited the people that are close to the government in this country. I understand how it's benefited a lot of like billionaires in this country. I understand how it's benefited countries around the world. But how has it benefited Main Street United States? Wall Street's doing great, but what about Main Street? And Jerome Powell is incapable of giving an answer. And basically what Luke Grumman's saying is like, there's going to be a shift, that Trump and company realized that the status quo is a failure for the United States, and that the pandemic and sort of this Ukraine situation has proved that. All of a sudden they realize like, we can't manufacture the very shit we need in a crisis. We are reliant on the very people that we say are our biggest enemies to survive anytime we need manufacturing or production. And so we have to bring manufacturing and production back home. We have to create our own military equipment here. We have to build our own munitions here. We have to have manufacturing of vehicles here. And he thinks that's the direction that things are going, and that the transition in those times is going to be getting away from the dollar as the world reserve currency and countries going more to gold being backing it because it's something that's more stable. And he's like, ultimately, he's very optimistic. He says, it won't be great for Wall Street at first, because the people that are in finance and the people that are in investing and moving pile money from point A to point B, they're going to become less important, and the dollar will be less important than sort of stable assets like gold. But it'll be very good for middle America because it'll drive up jobs like manufacturing, etc., and make like making stuff good again and valuable again. And those opportunities will come in the United States. Tucker's counter argument to that is, but those people you talked about in finance, they'll never let it happen. They'll start a world war before they let this game go, because the shell game is how they win. The idea that we could just print dollars when we want, and like they're not going to give that up. It doesn't matter. And Luke's like, yeah, but those people will still do great in this current system, but great's not enough. They like the system where they have almost total control. So some of it's above my head. I need to listen to it again and really like look up what they're talking about. But it's an interesting conversation, and it's sort of in lines with what I've been talking about, which is what America First really means is having pride in the country and actually having policies that are beneficial to the people in this country. I don't give a shit about your ethnicity. I don't even care about your religion and stuff like that. Our government exists because we're basically forced to partake in it. And therefore, the moral thing is that government should be looking out first and foremost for our own interest. I'm sorry, I don't give a shit about a country like Germany that arrests people for free speech and is going after right-wing populists, a group of which I happen to share an affinity for. Why should I be bound to be in a military alliance with them? Why should my tax dollars have to go to Ukraine, who jailed an American citizen named Gonzalo Lira, where he died in prison for the crime of free speech? Why should I have to send them a dime?
Yeah, right, exactly. No, that's one of the things that really irks me, that no one seems to care about, and except you've mentioned it, but it seems like not a lot of people talk about how they went in and okay, maybe they've got proof we don't know about, but to destroy one of the oldest churches in the Ukraine just because. No reason. I mean, they think
donated 19
it's a,
canonically they're tied to Russia. Their book says that's the reason.
Think that there could be a security concern. They never hauled out spies. They never had any trials. They never had they never put anything in the news. Oh, look, we got 10 Russian plants out of this church. We got to shut it down. No, none of that. Nothing. No, they just, nope, done. Can't meet there.
Well, you could just picture it was the opposite, right?
Right.
Picture that Ukraine, backed by NATO, invades Russia, right? And Russia shuts down like all Catholics in Russia and says, we think that they're connected to Ukraine. They're connected to the West, these Catholics, the popes, in the Vatican. We don't want that shit here. The West would howl. They'd be like, you can't shut down religion because of that. That's outrageous. You can't do that. And they would say, no. We have proof that they were working with Western intelligence. And the West would say, we don't give a shit, right? The truth is that all of this stuff is subjective. Like, we don't know shit. How can you know what you know when your own intel agencies will lie to you about the most blatant of shit, right? They lied to us about the bombing of the Nord Stream pipeline. They tried to tell us that Russia bombed their own pipeline. They did. Right? They're telling us, for example, they're telling us in Romania, this is what the official Western story is, that they had an election in Romania and a right-wing populist guy won, and the West said, no, that doesn't count because we think Russia influenced the election. So no, the election doesn't count. There's going to be a redo. Then the government of Romania arrests the guy that would have been their president. They arrest him. And the West is just like, yeah, that's all cool. That's cool. In Poland, when I debated Connor, I talked about this. The National Endowment of Democracy, which our dollars go to pay for, is writing and trying to influence the government of Poland that they need to arrest the leaders of the previous government, which happened to be right-wing populists, right? What was their crimes? One of the crimes were they pushed for mail-in voting during COVID, which clearly would be for fraud. Excuse me? So the same intel people that are overseas saying, if you're pushing for mail-in voting, that's for fraud, are telling us back home, you should be censored for suggesting that that's a possibility. So when you bring this up, like I'll just use Connor as an example because I'm dating him. Wink, wink. No wonder Connor's wife's been so mad at me. No, I'm debating him. When I bring this up, he's just like, yeah, so what? I don't like populists. Fuck them. They're probably bad people. I read a Wikipedia. He goes to Wikipedia and he reads one sentence. Yeah, they're bad people. They did bad shit. And it's like, we don't know shit here. We just have to accept selectively what our intel agencies say go. So if they're aligned with Ukraine and they say, yeah, trust us, the Orthodox Church in Ukraine is bad news, man, then they just go, oh, okay, it's bad news. And if the opposite happened, if that church would have never been banned and Trump would say, hey, we want you to ban this church, and then Zelensky did it, the same lefties would be telling you, this is outrageous. They banned this church. How could they do it? So I'm tired of buying this bullshit. I know enough to know I don't know. I know enough to know that it's a very fucking serious thing when you tell people that they can't practice their own religion in allegedly a democracy. You want another one? How about right out of the gate, one of the first things that happened during this conflict was this dude that was considered Ukrainians like one of their top negotiators that was negotiating with Russia for peaceful resolutions. He was killed by Zelensky's people in a van, thrown in a van and shot. It's fucking, there's proof of it. It's in the papers, but I'm sure there's some explanation. Oh, they later found out that he was Russian or whatever. That's all you have to say. If we get accused of spreading Putin's talking points here, right? If we were in Ukraine and they just executed us, what do you think the majority of the lefty Americans would say? Well, must have been spreading Putin's talking points. I guess he had it coming. So how could why when I have no trust? I watch these pricks lie back home. By the way, not just our intel agencies, but the government of Ukraine. Sergei Lyshenko is one of the top advisors to Zelensky, one of Zelensky's point men. He's in a Financial Times article in October of 2016 talking about how he's intervening in the United States election to stop Trump from winning. They had this black ledger that was bullshit, never proven to be true, that said that Paul Manafort was connected to all these Russians, which helped the Russia collusion narrative that was all bullshit from the get-go. Zelensky's if you're Trump, why do you trust that dude? You did exactly what we accused Russia of doing. You interfered in our elections to help my opponent and hurt me. And now we're going to just send this guy money for infamy? Now, I'm sorry.
This goes back to my argument for isolationism. Now you've got Mexico trying to sue gun companies in the United States.
Well, there's another thing, right? Our NGO. So because that pesky First Amendment, it's difficult for our government to look at a company like X and say, okay, we're shutting you down. So what do? They farm it out to the NGOs. USAID then pays a bunch of NGOs that goes to the European Union and says, hey, European Union, here's what you do. Create a law that says X has to censor like pro-populist viewpoints that we call far right wing. And if not, you can't operate. Now, it used to be, again, going back to what's good for GMs, good for the country, that the United States stood up abroad for American companies. Now, your tax dollars are going to, because your government's having trouble directly censoring you, in order to stop that company, the idea is, well, we'll use the tax dollars to pressure the European Union because they don't have the First Amendment to punish this company that we want shut down because populists get a view on there. That's what's going on. We're paying money for that. Your tax dollars is going for that. How does that make any? Well, it makes sense from the perspective of they don't give a shit when they say.
Well, they're also globalist, right? Like, I mean, they want this to happen. They need it to happen. They can't not have a war. They can't not have a police action. They can't not have this drama going on in the world. First of all, you can't shine the light of truth on local news, right? Like, you just can't do that. Like, you can't take Let me posit something here, and that is, my position is, if we were out of the Middle East, if we were out of the Ukraine, if we were out, it was just like, Ukraine, go do it on your own, I don't care one way or the other. We pulled all the troops out of Seoul, and the other 12 air, or I don't know, it might not be 12, 10, whatever it is, bases that we have in Korea, South Korea. We pull out of Japan, everybody comes home, bring all our shit, all our toys. We're taking our fucking toys and we're coming home. And we bring them all back. Well, then guess what? Guess what the news has to talk about? Local stuff. Now, all of a sudden, all the politicians, all these guys have been making backroom deals all across the world under a microscope. And they can't have that. They can't have it, Rob.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of truth to that. That's absolutely true, right? You need that boogeyman, and maybe that boogeyman. It's Russia now. Maybe
it's just like Wick freaking the fuck out that Russia's going to invade us. We have to stop the fucking Ukrainians. The Russians.
You're
in your what?
You're in your 50s. I don't know how old Wick is. This is the same type of rhetoric that I heard from the right and the neocons about Saddam Hussein. It was the same thing. Oh, you're against the Iraq war?
Fucking Russians invade since I was in high school 30 fucking years ago.
You remember there were freedom fries? Remember that? We can't call them French fries. They're freedom fries because those damn Frenchmen, they're not supporting us going into Iraq, those pricks. So they're freedom fries and all these people. And I was marching against the Iraq war. I was protesting. I was a Ron Paul Republican. And almost everyone that was with me were lefties that I knew in college. Right. And now they're like, well, you've changed. And I'm like, how have I changed? Didn't you massively distrust the United States military industrial complex, including our intel agents? Yeah. But now you trust them implicitly. And you want to keep financing to keep this war going in perpetuity. Well, it's different now because Russia's evil. Oh, you mean like Saddam? Right? It's the same bullshit, right? Yeah. Why would I trust these people? Let's look at some recent decisions that NATO intelligence and military in the United States. Well, we have Libya. We were told Gaddafi was this horrible person, which I'm sure he was, right? So how did that work out? Well, Libya went from the highest literacy rate in portions of Africa, right, to open-air slave markets. Now, where's Rick? Where's all of these lefties? Where are they saying, my God, we went in and overthrew that government and toppled it, and now the new government's brutal for its people? Where are they clamoring for us to go in and clean that up? They don't give a shit. Okay, how about Iraq? Well, we know the boondoggle that was there. How about Afghanistan? For 20 years, we were told over and over, if we just stay one more year, that'll be good, and then the Afghani people will be able to overthrow the Taliban, and it'll be good. So what happened? It took all of 3 fucking days from us leaving to where that country's right back to the position that it was previously and probably worse. Because now everyone that worked with the United States military there is being targeted for execution, no doubt. And instead of trying to bring those people to the United States, they literally just opened the doors to airplanes because they foolishly got rid of Bagram Air Base, which meant that we had to rely on the Taliban for defense against allegedly ISIS. The same Taliban who went into Bagram and freed ISIS. So then what predictably happens? They launch a bomb that kills American soldiers and a bunch of civilians. So we're panicking and just leaving everyone into the planes. I'm telling all the lefties how fucking stupid this. What a disaster. They're not vetting these people. Of course they're being vetted. What do we find out years later? Turns out they didn't vet these people.
They didn't vet anybody.
We didn't. Oh, it turns out that not only that, we left hundreds of Americans there. And that's not to speak of the translators, the military people, etc., that helped the United States. Now they're there to be tortured and butchered with their family. Great job. Great job, Wes. All we did was spend over $1 trillion to leave that country in the exact same position as when we found it. Fucking brilliant. How about Syria? Well, in Syria, we're there to fight ISIS. And so we have to team with Al-Qaeda and al-Nusra. Wait a minute. I thought Al-Qaeda was so bad that we had to give up our Fourth Amendment in the United States and have the Patriot Act. Isn't that how bad Al-Qaeda is? Yeah, but now we got to team with them and help arm them and shit in places like Syria. Also, we're allied with the Kurds there, but we have to stay in Syria forever because if we leave, our NATO ally Turkey will commit genocide against the Kurds. So we have to stay there to make sure that our allies, the Kurds, and our ally Turkey don't commit genocide against each other. But while we're here, we'll bomb Assad. How's that sound? And then we eventually lead to the disposition of Assad. So now we have basically Al-Qaeda running Syria. I read a story today that Aaron Matei was talking about. In Syria, there were open executions in the street in some area today. Syria is going to be a hellhole. It's going to go the way of Libya. I'm not saying Assad was a good guy. I'm not saying Saddam was a good guy. I'm not saying Gaddafi's a good guy. I'm not saying any of that. But when we say
hold on, Rob, let me ask you, man. Let me ask you. So if we weren't there, if we didn't have bases there, if we didn't have the global footprint, the superiority that everyone thinks that we have, this force projection that in some way makes us a superpower, if none of that should happen, do you think it'd be I'm going to precede this by saying that I'm a reader. I read all the time, and I remember I used to read books about how Beirut was considered the Paris of the Middle East. It was women actually walked around in like dresses. They weren't veiled. They had fashion shows. They had all of this stuff there. All of this stuff, and it was a beautiful city, beautiful fountains, all of the stuff. And then we came along, and we fucked it up. I'm not saying we did it intentionally. I'm not saying that we wanted to, but the longer we stay in the Middle East, the worse it fucking gets, man. Why do we think that we're the people to solve this problem, Rob? Nobody's ever been able to explain that to me. Look, Americans are mostly Christian and we don't like Muslims. Why do we think we are going to solve problems in a Muslim country? It's
because the people that are making these decisions are corrupt and they're incompetent, and their goals are never the well-being of the countries that we're being told. Their goal, for example, take Libya. Their goal was never, we care about the people of Libya. Their goal was, Gaddafi's talking about an African dinar and not using the U.S. currency as as their reserve currency. So that shit can't stand. Right. That was the goal. They didn't give a fuck how the people of that country ended up. They did not care. That was not factored into what they were talking about. They were indifferent. The goals in Afghanistan, the goal wasn't, we're just here for the benefit of the people. If it was for the benefit of the people, like one of the things they did, someone mentioned it about, look up the depleted uranium scandal, where we're using depleted uranium rounds in a war against basically, insurgents, and we're using rounds like this, which is causing cancer for the population that's there. One of the first things we did, imagine being a farmer in Afghanistan. Basically, it was like 12 provinces, and you had warlords that ran each province. And these warlords would come in, and you're growing some crop that's worth something, to feed your family. And these warlords would come in and be like, we're going to kill your family unless you grow poppy. Okay, so they grow poppy. So what's the United States do? First thing they do, they come in, they cut down the poppy fields. Like right out of the gate. So all the farmers that are screwed. Right? They're screwed. But then they supported, once they screwed over all these farmers in the short term, they supported it, which made Afghanistan continue to be one of the world's largest exporter of heroin, poppy.
Yeah.
And it's like, They do this shit.
He hated that.
Someone said in my chat, wait a minute, Rob's saying on one hand, we made a mistake by leaving Afghanistan, but we're making a mistake by not leaving Syria. No, we were right to leave Afghanistan. The mistake was fucking up their country with trillions of dollars for 20 years and then leaving it in the stupid way that we did, right? That was the mistake. We shouldn't be in Syria either. That, like, we were told, though, we're lied to. I think there were 17 generals over the 20 years in Afghanistan that were in charge of it, something like that. And all of them told us it's going great. The local government's doing great.
Well, they love us. They love us over there.
Those are the people that we're supposed to believe when they say, okay, we fucked up Libya, we fucked up Iraq, we fucked up Syria, right? We fucked up Afghanistan, but trust us now in Ukraine. Trust us. When I have, like, and it's so frustrating because you hear these people talk, right? You could hear Chris Murphy on C-SPAN in 2014 saying, absolutely, the United States is helping. If it wasn't for us with threats of sanction and helping out with on-the-ground logistics, this revolution in Ukraine might not have happened. Now Chris Murphy will tell you now in 2025, that's a conspiracy to say the United States had anything to do with the Maidan coup. That's ridiculous. You were on national television saying that. And now you're in real time as it was occurring. And now you're like, that's a conspiracy. You know, one of my favorite examples of this is this guy who comes off as very smart. But the more you listen to him, you realize he is smart. Don't get me wrong. But you realize that he's just like a mouthpiece for like CIA talking points. His name's Peter Zahan, right? And I listened to Peter, and he was talking about how basically this was like maybe 2 years ago. I can't remember, a year and a half. He was talking about basically Ukraine, that the war was going to come down to this, that if it became a war of attrition, Russia would win. And so Ukraine needs to cause a mass casualty event because the only two options Ukraine has to win is domestic upheaval overthrowing Putin, which seems unlikely. And so the other would be a mass casualty event, which would mean they'd have to blow up this particular dam that fed all of these fields that fed Russians. So that dam gets blown up. And then the West and Peter Zahan are like, oh, Russia did it. Like, without even an attempt at an explanation of like, well, why would Russia blow up the dam that you said was the key to them losing the war if that dam got blown up? Why would they do it themselves? And it was the same people that said, well, Russia blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. Well, Russia was the ones that bombed Poland. And then each time when you like investigate and interrogate, you're like, this doesn't even make sense. But they don't give a shit. That's just how blatant the propaganda is. And I'll give you a chance to speak. Like, the last thing I'll say about it is, it's very similar when you come to these things. It's difficult. The average person doesn't have time to look into like, well, what the Nord Stream pipeline? What are you talking about with that, right? And even I don't have as much time as I would like, right? But you could tell. Here's a neat like way that you could tell when you're being fed a line of shit. When instead of answering like serious questions, instead you're just insulted, not just by random Twitter guy, but like by the people that are actually the movers and shakers in our country. So like when you say something like, I don't know, it sounds like we're just feeding a meat grinder that's leading to Ukrainians die. Maybe we should try to negotiate a ceasefire with Russia. And the Democrats and the neocons answer is, you're in bed with Vladimir Putin. Doesn't that sound a lot like, wait a minute, you're saying vaccine mandates and lockdowns? But won't that be very harmful? Won't that do a lot of bad? And their response was, what, do you want grandma to die? Or how about after 9/11 when I was like, hey, how is it that the Pentagon, which should be the most protected building like in the world, like the center of our military intelligence in the most powerful nation, how after 3 planes attacked the United States did a 4th manage to hit the Pentagon? Like, why didn't we get fighters in the air and like prevent that? What was the story? Was there a change in protocol? And the answer you get to that question is, what, do you hate America? Like, there's part of you that's like, methinks you protest too much. What? It's almost like you don't have a competent answer. You're like, shut up and eat your propaganda, asshole. Don't ask difficult questions. And so that's how, like, you could tell by these people's reaction. Have you ever talked with a guy, his name's I'm Really Important?
I've heard him speak. I've not talked to him, though.
He was on the Pretty Fly for a White Guy video from Offspring. He was the character in that music video. Anyways, he's a left-wing streamer. One time after Russia invaded, I was talking to him, and we're talking about the Ukrainian lab, the biolabs. And he's like, that's a lie. Those biolabs aren't there. And I'm like, actually, Victoria Nuland basically admitted it in testimony like a few weeks ago. And here's what we know about it. And I start to outline the scenario. Would you be comfortable if you're Russia and you think the United States had something to do with financing the lab that created COVID, and now they're running labs right on your border with massively lethal biological agents? Would you be comfortable with that? And he's like, you're spreading Putin's talking points. And I said, well, what about that's not true? What about anything I said's not true? And he said to me, it doesn't matter if it's true. It's still Putin's talking points. Now,
I think I heard that actually. I think I heard that. I didn't know that that's who that was, but yeah.
Yeah. So if you listen to like Mike Benz and sort of he calls it the blob, the deep state, whatever you want to call it, their war on disinformation, he outlines when they say disinformation, they mean three things. They mean malinformation. And what malinformation is things you say that aren't correct, but you didn't know it. So if you said, like, for example, yeah, I think the Steelers won the Super Bowl last year, and you really believe that, that's malinformation. Disinformation is when you're knowingly lying, right? But I'm sorry, there's misinformation is what I was talking about first, is when you say something but you don't know it's a lie. Disinformation is when you know it's a lie. Malinformation is information that's true, but it's inconvenient to their narrative. So like malinformation would be like this. Hey guys, I went and got a COVID vaccine yesterday, and guess what? I had a horrible reaction to it. Now that's true. If that happened, it's true, but you still should be censored from saying it because it is truth that harms the narrative that they want to push.
Right.
And that's, in a nutshell, what you're spreading Putin's talking points. Douglas Murray, who I really respect, he puts an article out yesterday that's like sort of bashing the people that are saying we should stop funding Ukraine. And the big segment that people are talking about, he's like, for all of the people that criticize Zelensky and say he's a dictator, why don't you turn your eyes to Russia? Look how much worse Putin is. My answer to that is I don't give a shit. I'm not arguing Putin's a good guy. Yeah, everything you say about Putin's probably true. He's probably a fucking monster. He's a dictator. What does that have to do with my position? See, you're strawmanning me because you're implying that if I say it would be the best for the American people, for the Ukrainian people, and for the world for us to stop financing this war and try to have a peaceful resolution, you're strawmanning that as me being pro-Russian. I'm not pro-Russian. I'm not.
It's absolutely insane the way people come at you. If you just don't like Putin is a horrible person. And I always say, like look, Putin's a bad man. Let's make no mistake. Not only do you not want him for a neighbor, you really kind of want him locked up somewhere, that he can't do anybody any harm because, he's a legit KGB guy, right? Like, he is the guy that has people killed. That we can't get away from that. Like, he's a bad guy. But that doesn't make him wrong about the things that he has been talking about. And it doesn't make it wrong for Trump to treat him with respect as the leader of his country.
The difference is Zelensky is our vassal. Zelensky is the beggar. Zelensky is the person, and then people say, beggar, how dare you denigrate the Ukraine? That's not what I'm doing when I say that. Zelensky is the person whose country will cease to exist and he will be ousted from power unless he gets aid from the United States. That's the position he comes in. It's the equivalent of if I lived at your house, Grid Motorsports, and didn't pay a dime in food, rent, whatever for years, right? I have nothing to offer you. You're subsidizing me. I'm homeless without you. So for me to come and make demands of you is outrageous. It's absolutely outrageous. Everybody understands that. The point is, you expect if you're paying for me, you would expect if you ask me something that I'd be more willing to do it. So I don't know how to use this house example. Like, for example, if you're like, hey, Rob, look, man, all I'm asking is that you wash your own dishes and please take the garbage out like every Tuesday. Can you do that? You're living here rent free. Like, people would be like, how dare you ask Rob that? Why don't you ask your enemy, right? Your rival at work, Grid. Why don't you ask him? And you're like, yeah, fuck that guy. I don't like him, but he ain't the one that owes me something. So, for example,
Right.
When you look at like being critical of Zelensky, like with the killing of Gonzalo Lira, right? Well, you don't think Russia has done shit to Americans? Yeah. And the way you deal with it with Russia is you had to negotiate because they're our enemy. And so you're like, okay, we want Brittany Griner back. And they're like, okay, what are you willing to give us? We gave this guy the Merchant of Death, right? Victor, I forget his last name, right? That's what we did.
Yeah,
and I was for bringing Brittany Griner back, by the way, right? Now you have a situation with Gonzalo Lira. We shouldn't have to be like, oh, what will we give you to get our American citizen back, Ukraine? Because we're already giving you. The conversation should have went like this. You got an American in jail? What was it that he did? Well, he criticized our government. Right. We call that free speech. We're going to want him back like now. And if they were like, no, they'd say, okay, then we're not going to send you anything more till you change your mind. And it would have taken half a day for them to be like, okay, sir, We got him on a plane right now. That's what would have happened. You expect your allies and your friends. That's the same sort of conversation with NATO. Of course, I don't expect China to be benefiting the United States militaristically, but I do expect those countries that have been involved in a treaty with us to hold up their end of the obligation. So when they're not, you're like, hey, what the hell's going on here?
Well, Rob, that's actually a sticking point for me because very few countries have ever held their end of the treaties up. We can go back all the way back to, all right, so globalism started at the end of World War II. We kicked everybody's asses. We owned everything, and we gave it all back. But there were treaties involved. Now, my favorite thing to pick on is, and they literally said last night in the debate that it didn't, or the other night on Wick's panel, that in his debate, that it didn't matter. They're fucking wrong, and they know they're wrong. The three countries now have finally paid us back the war debt from World War II. It's almost 70 years ago, Rob.
Yeah.
Finland, Japan, and England finally paid their war debt back in 2000. I think it was 2008. Took them half a century, Rob. Half fucking century.
Well, listen,
and everybody wants globalism, man. What is globalism? Is us picking up the check. Literally, we're Uncle Bob, and we're taking the whole family out to fucking dinner, and we're picking up the check. That's what it is. The whole world.
So not only that, right? But the United States itself violates treaties all the time. Maybe the most important treaty in the world has been the Non-Proliferation Treaty, the NPT. The United States violates it all the time, right? We rightfully will freak the fuck out if a country we don't like is pursuing nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
Everybody understands that. We know that. And so this worldwide treaty, the Non-Proliferation Treaty, it had a bunch of context. Can you name me another country that has given nuclear technology to a country at war? I can't think of one. The United States gave nukes to Israel. We deny it, but everybody knows it happened. That's how Israel became a nuclear-armed superpower, because the United States gave them nukes. Despite the fact that we were running around the world telling countries that you can't pursue nuclear weapons. In addition to that, I think it's like Article 1 and 4 talk about you can't develop new types of nuclear weapons. The United States does that shit all the time. They brag about it. Bunker buster nuclear technology. You remember during the Afghan war where they were like, oh, these bunkers are like a mile deep. And so these bunker busting nukes, they could penetrate like a mile into the earth, hit these bunkers and have these limited nuclear explosions that would be able to take out these, right? Like that treaty, from the perspective of a country like Russia, you'd be like, hey, what's up with that? If we start developing nukes, you're going to flip the fuck out. But you guys are doing it. And that's just one example. Again, even if it isn't specifically outlined in the treaty, the United States allowed NATO to proceed eastward and encircle Russia.
Yeah.
Like where there are sort of international law that may not be exactly treaties that say that countries can't meddle in other countries' elections. The United States does that all the time. That was the Cold War, baby.
We have a department for that. It's called the CIA.
That's right. Now we have USAID that helps. The NGOs are doing more than the CIA is at this point, right? That's and so it's like, and then it's like, okay, well, what about moral obligations? Putin's morally an evil person, so we have to intervene. How far are you willing to take this? Like, you mean like boots on the ground? Like World War III? Is that what you mean? Or is it just that we have to finance Ukraine to a stalemate so that their men can die? And why is it just Putin? I could throw a dart at a map in a country in the Middle East, Africa, and the leaders there are going to be horrible people that brutalize their own population. Do we intervene there? What's the limit here? Why are we willing to work with people that credibly have been accused of human rights violations like people in Saudi Arabia? Right? We'll work with them while they're bombing Yemen, but that's okay.
But Rob, they're our friends.
Right. And that's what it comes to. And like the people, and again, I'm not saying I'm unabashedly pro-American, but for me, what that means is our government should look out for the well-being of our citizens first and foremost, but they shouldn't intentionally cause unethical harm to others for our well-being. So I'm not for the United States becoming imperial and saying like, we're just going to go to war with France and take all of their shit. I'm not for that. I don't want to go to war in Iraq so we can have their oil. That's not what I want. But the government should be looking out for the interests of our people first and foremost, right? What happens instead is there's an agenda set by people that I don't think give a shit about people like in my area of the world, rural Pennsylvania. And it picks and chooses who's the axis of evil and who we have to go after. But then people that engage in similar behavior will support in other places. I mean, again, what clearer do you need to see that Al-Qaeda is our ally in Syria? So any claims of this moral high ground where it's like, well, morally we have to fight Putin. I have people, this childish mentality that's like, you can't give an inch. You must fight him to the end. Well, what if Iraq had the same idea against the United States for illegally invading their country? What if Syria feels that United States? What about Libya? Would you support those people, say, committing attacks against the population of the United States to fight back to get their country back? Would you support that and say, well, hey, morally, the United States was the aggressor, and so if that means they can never give up, they have to go not 1 inch. The United States is the aggressor. There shouldn't get 1 ounce of land or one benefit. It's a childish mentality, and it's done by people that they're big fucking talkers. They got their little Ukrainian flag in their Facebook page, but
that's how you know they're serious.
Are they going to fight? Or no, they just want to morally grandstand while Ukrainians have to die. Is that it? Why don't you give those noble Ukrainian men a break and go volunteer? But I'm only one person, Rob. Yeah, but there are millions of you, if not thousands, that say that. So why don't you get a band of thousands of you together and go fight? After all, it's the only moral thing to do. You can't give 1 inch to Putin, right? Isn't that the argument?
Well, if you do, he's going to swim across the ocean and attack the United States.
It's all bullshit. It's all moral grandstanding. And like, again, okay, well, you can't fight. Okay, well, open your pocketbook. Nothing's stopping you for giving money to NGOs that are operating in Ukraine.
You know one of my favorite techniques, Rob, is to ask people how much they wrote in on their taxes.
That's right.
You think that I should pay more tax because I play this card, and I admit it's a dick move, but it goes along with being a dick, and that is I paid a shit ton of taxes. The government stole enough from me that they had to refund me more than some people make in a year. Last year, my refund was $98,000.
You selfish prick. What are you doing?
I know. They kept 200 something of it, but whatever. So I'm pissed about that. I'm pissed. I'm like, I don't want to ever talk to people about, soaking the rich, because that's me. When you say soak the rich, you're literally talking to me. So let me ask you something. How much extra did you write in? Or did you take the refund? Did you take the refund?
I talked to a young man the other day, called into my channel. I don't know if you heard it. He said, I would happily pay more in taxes. I said, okay, then do it.
Yeah.
When you say that, what you're really saying is, I would pay more if I could also force everyone else to pay more. You're not saying that you would pay more. And you know how I know that? Because you can pay more. Yeah. You literally can. So do it. Or my favorite argument is the white privilege argument. And I don't know if you've ever heard me talk about this. I got in an argument. The reason I don't post to Facebook anymore is because people I knew in real life would get in these ridiculous arguments with me based on my politics, right? And so there was this guy that I knew from being a drunk that was also a drunk that still lived in the small town I was at that saw me sort of decrying Black Lives Matter at the height of the George Floyd riots, because I was basically making the argument. As you should have. Yeah, they're burning down black neighborhoods. Why would I support this? Why does it make me a racist to say, why are these people going into, if you really got a beef, why aren't you heading to fucking Martha's Vineyard? Why aren't you heading to Aspen? All those rich places. But no, you're going into poor black neighborhoods and lighting fires. And anyways, this guy gave me shit, and we had this conversation about white privilege, and I was like, well, what's my white privilege? And he said, oh, so much of the shit you have in life is because you and your ancestors stole it from black people. I said, do you feel the same way? Because I know he's a white guy. He says, yes. I said, how much of your shit that you own is stolen from black people? He said, probably 50%. I said, okay, give it back. Huh? I was like, I got black friends. You could start with them. Maybe one wants your TV, one wants your car. Sounds fair, right? Well, no. I'm like, now put yourself in the position of a black person. On one hand, they might disagree with me and say, I think Rob's wrong. I think there is white privilege. I think whites have stolen from blacks and they owe us something. But on the other hand, there's you that's saying, yeah, I stole from you, but I won't give it back. Who's more moral in this situation? I firmly believe I don't owe them anything. You do. You believe you owe them, that you stole it, but you won't give it back. Why? Because you're selfish? That's it. That's the reason. And it's all bullshit. It's all just, well, I'm supposed to say this. This is what you say to be popular and fit in. And I'm happy that a lot of that, to me, that's even more exciting to some extent than Trump winning, which is that a lot of that shit's turning. You see it with the trans bullshit. Like, you had to say it. You had to say whatever they said you had to say. You had to pretend that there weren't biological differences in athletics. You had to pretend it was okay that a bunch of fucking kids are transitioning. You just had to pretend it, you know? And now people are like, nah, bullshit. And it's, you know, it's sad that it comes to that, but, you know, it's just, and so getting back to the Ukraine situation, it's the same bullshit, right? What you're really saying is what you're like, at least just make like the Lindsey Graham argument, right? And someone said it the other day. Swalwell said it again the other day. Well, the return on investment and the money we're sending is fantastic because we're bleeding Russia out. Just say that. Just say, I'm okay with Ukrainians dying to the last man if it means harming Russia. Just say that. Because as an American, I think Russia's bad, and so fuck them. That's fine. You could make that argument, but don't pretend that you're more moral than me. You don't give a fuck about those Ukrainian people. You don't care. Because if you did, you'd be volunteering. Or you would at least be advocating for boots on the ground. What? Again, if that's your claim that Russia's so evil and blah, 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 and they should already have a security guarantee, then why not send troops now? Why didn't Biden send troops? Well, because that would have escalated.
Well, Biden wasn't running the country. I mean, his handlers were.
Of course.
Remember, he was in a coma.
By the way, interesting lawsuit that's being suggested. I saw some Republican is accusing Biden of being mentally incompetent, so all of his pardons and executive orders should be null and void because he wasn't competent to make them. It's interesting. And apparently, you know, I don't think that will win, but it's a good argument as the problems of having an infirmed president who's really running the show. If the pardoning power solely lies within the body of the president's, you know, team can't pardon anyone. Only he can. But if he's a vegetable,
I had this debate. I'm sorry. You just reminded me of something, and before I lose it. So I had this debate with this Nina girl or whatever the fuck her name is. And
I've talked to her, I think.
And Ghosty, right? And it was a 2v2. The subject was Trump right to pardon, or pardon me, was the pardoning of Ross Ulbright justified? I said it was. They never actually proved he did anything except set up a website.
Right.
They never proved and he sold like years ago he sold some mushrooms.
Right.
Like that was it. They had a Fed who went undercover who tried desperately to prove that Albright would he would move weight or whatever for Albright. Albright said, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. I want to deal with you. That guy got so bad that guy had that guy so bad the guy had to be removed. That agent had to be removed from the case, and I think he actually faced censure for it. They set his ass up, and in the court proceedings, they said that the judge actually told the jury that even though they couldn't they couldn't prosecute him for 6 supposed murder for hires because they could never find any actual murder for hire having been done. There were no bodies. There was nobody missing. There was no money transfer. There was nothing. There was nothing except Albright writing to somebody, yeah, I would pay to have this guy killed if I, whatever. Which somebody could say that. I mean, anybody could say that. And the judge literally said that that evidence carries enough weight, or lack of evidence carries enough weight, that I consider him guilty of it. Said that to the jury. That's not prejudicial at all, Rob. Why is that not? What's the problem there, right?
Our legal system, it's the same with so many of these January 6th trials. If you sit down, it's like, let me give you an example, right? Did you see Bill Murray on Joe Rogan talking about, what's his name? The fucking writer from Nixon, Bernstein, right? Right. And he's like, when I read Bernstein's book about John Belushi, I made it 5 pages in and was like, oh shit, they framed Nixon because he knows Belushi. And so when he sees this dude writing it, he's like, he's so full of shit, and I talk about this a lot. I forget the name of it. I first heard Scott Adams talk about it, which is this phenomenon. Someone in my chat will know. It's this phenomenon where you'll be an expert in a particular field and you pick up the newspaper and you read it and you're like, oh, the newspaper's right about this economic news and it's right about this foreign policy news and it's right. But you're an engineer. And then all of a sudden there's a story about engineering and you're like, holy shit, this is so wrong. They don't know what they're talking about. But you assume they're right about everything else. It's the same with these trials. We assume, like, sure, there's some malfeasance, but over and all, the legal system's good, and these trials are being ran rather smoothly. So when you hear Ross Ulbricht found guilty, right, you're like, I must be guilty. But then when you sit down and you watch one trial that you're interested in, and you're like, holy shit, like, what is happening here? Like, maybe it was the Derek Chauvin trial, or maybe it was the O.J. Simpson trial for the older folks like me, you know, that you saw, and you're like, wow, what is going on here, right? And like January 6th, there's so many trials. You start to look into the details. You're like, holy shit! Some of the things these judges were doing, like it's really insane. And that's the problem. Like, what's Ross Ulbricht? What did he really do? What's his real crime? Why was he targeted by our agencies in the first place? Because he set up something that could be used by the drug trade that they couldn't control. That's the real crime, you know, because they don't give a shit about how many traffickers, like real drug traffickers, are they giving sweetheart deals for. Ulbricht got life, didn't he? I mean, he was looking at life in prison.
Double life plus 40 years.
Yeah.
For setting up a website.
Yes. And I mean, you think about it, it's like maybe you say, I don't like drugs. That deserve prison time. 2 life sentences?
So I have this debate with these two knuckleheads. They spend the whole debate arguing about fucking drugs and drug charges, and that he was drug trafficking. I saw, like, they never convicted of him. They never were able to actually prove he trafficked drugs. Well, he was convicted of it. I understand that the judge convicted him of it, but they were never able to prove it. But he was convicted of it. And I was like, this tremendous. And I was, after a while, I'm like, this is I literally in the debate said, you were dumb. Like, I don't ever argue with dumb people, but you were dumb. You were the dumbest person I've ever debated with, ever. I can't believe that I'm debating you and you're this stupid. And it was really terrible. It was so bad. And it's this way with our government, right? Like, our government, for all of the great things that it can do, it doesn't fucking do them. And then when it has no reason to, it has to be absolutely ridiculously penitent, or not.
Well, it's punitive. Like, it's got to be.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Your
By the way,
chat saying my mic is really loud. I just turned me down a little bit, but I just speak really loud, guys. I enunciate.
Maybe I don't know. Listen, I'll tell you right now. I'm so I'm using this new StreamYard, so I don't know how to begin to fix it. By the way, it's called the Gell-Mann effect. Gell-Mann amnesia. That's what it was. Yeah. It's coined by Michael Crichton. But that effect I was talking about, reading the newspaper there. But I got to get moving. I actually have a doctor appointment tomorrow morning. So anything you want to talk about to, like, just finish her up?
Yeah, man. So so, you know, I'm helping out with DebateCon.
Yeah.
And I've done everything I can, man, to get you on board. And what I'm trying to do now, so we're actually trying to have it. I'm going to talk to you off camera about this, because I don't. But it looks like it's going to be in Tennessee. It looks like the venue is going to be different. We want to. James and I are both in agreement that we would rather have it in on a college campus.
Okay.
In actual auditoriums, actual venues, good, better audio, better visuals, all of that. And what I'm trying to do right now, what I would like to do is I want to have the main card, right? So think of it as fight night. Mm-hmm. You got the main card, and that'll be all of the guys that James wants to have on there that he thinks is going to get him 1 million views or whatever. And he probably will. I think they're trying to get Cenk Wager, whatever.
Oh, Cenk.
Yeah. We're trying to get him. I actually suggested you and Cenk.
I would love it.
I suggested that. So I know you would. But then we're going to have we're going to have at least one other room with what I consider down card, which is, guys like you that don't have 2 million subs, that don't, you're not Destiny, although you kick his ass every time you go up against him. You are, you're badass, but that'll be the down ticket. And there'll be, we're still trying to I'm trying to understand whether James wants this to be totally impromptu, because what I had originally suggested was totally impromptu. You just find somebody and you guys start discussing things, take positions, and debate. It might become a little more organized than that because of James. What James has a very specific mannerism about him. It doesn't seem like he likes disorder. So
yeah. So what I was gonna talk to you about this, right?
Yeah.
You have to. What is it that you're trying to get out of it, right? There's obviously multiple goals. Like part of the goals that you want to get eyeballs, that you want to get
James and I have kind of different goals, but that's okay because you can have different goals in the same set. James is looking for people like Cenk and Andrew and Alex Stein and all of these people. He doesn't actually look at the quality of the debate that's going to happen. He's looking at the quality of views that he's going to get.
Mm-hmm.
So in his mind, it's better for him to put Brianna Wu versus Alex Stein for the 80th time and discuss religion or whatever than it is to put you versus Cenk Olner or whatever. Although I think that would probably bring in a lot of views too, but maybe that may be a bad example. But to put somebody that even though they're really popular in the sphere, they don't have that 2 million. For example, I suggested Pearl, even though she doesn't debate. I said, Pearl would be a good commentator. You should probably make her part of it. The problem is that Pearl, she has 2 million subs, but her engagement is very, very low.
Mm-hmm.
So he's just analytically to him. So he's just all about the numbers. It's all analytics.
Well, so that's fine. Right. Which is
what I'm talking about is, and I'm good with that. Have your A card, go do that, do the big thing. What I want to do is, and we've talked about this. Well, I originally wanted 3 rooms. I wanted 2 A card rooms going at the same time, and then 1 down card room or impromptu room where guys like you and IRI could and some of these guys just don't debate in person.
Sure.
So they, wouldn't be the thing, but have a good moderator, and just kind of, and have that down ticket for people who just want to come watch a good debate that doesn't necessarily want to see Alex Stein debate Jasmine Jafar for the 5th time.
So here's what I would say. It's James's show. He can do what he wants. You're working with him. You can do it, right? Yeah. But my suggestion would be this. If part of the goal is to get big names and stuff, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with it. It doesn't, the skill of the debater is less important than the spectacle of getting the big name in. That's fine, right? But one thing I would say is, if you're getting the big name, you don't need big name versus big name, right? You need... Right, people are going to tune in to watch Cenk versus anyone. People are going to tune in to watch, if you get, a big right winger, Charlie Kirk. It wouldn't matter if Charlie Kirk's debating Joe Schmo. People are going to watch because it's Charlie Kirk. It doesn't have to be Charlie Kirk versus Cenk. Now that might bring in slightly more, but if the goal is to get multiple videos of multiple debates, that's number one. Now, why would you need a big person versus a big person? Because why would Cenk agree to debate me? That's part of the problem, right? Cenk. You have to sell, and this is true anytime that you're setting up debates online, but it would also be true if you're setting up in real life. You have to convince the bigger person why it's worth them to debate the smaller person. So, for example, Destiny would debate Steven Crowder. Why? Because Steven Crowder arguably has a bigger audience than Destiny, or at least has a huge audience that it would be a matter of prestige. But if I debated with the exact equal rhetoric as Steven Crowder and the exact skill, hypothetically, would Destiny be interested in debating me? Would Vosh? Would Cenk? Would Sam Cedar? Probably not, because they don't want something that would be perceived as a challenge while at the same time bringing very little prestige or eyeballs to them. Right. And so there is this mix that you're playing. How do you convince a bigger person to come in that traditionally doesn't come in? And so, like, let's say you're trying to get a big, well, money's a big, right? Money's certainly one way to do it. But let's say you're trying to get someone like, let's say that doesn't really do this debate circle stuff, like formerly at the Washington Post, I believe, CIA analysts, Philip Bump, who I'd love to fucking debate on the Biden corruption stuff. How would you ever get someone like Philip Bump in? Well, he's not going to debate some no-name, and he's not going to debate a debate bro. So he's not going to come in and debate Charlie Kirk or something like that. So it would have to be billed to him more as like, well, a panel discussion. And like, so there's different ways to go about it. I think, for me, if I was setting it up, I don't disagree with James's idea that you do want as many big names as possible. And the idea is eventually, if you want to build a brand, you want to be the brand which brings people in, right? So James wants to set up modern day debate where it's, I could call Cenk Uyghur and say, hey, you should do this debate. And he wants to do it not because of who his opponent is, not because he's getting paid, but because he knows the prestige of the brand of modern day debate. And there's going to be eyeballs on it. And it's considered. So James is right, I think, in that sense of building up a brand to want big names that get big eyeballs. But I think that he also needs to be thinking of it, and this is, again, just my advice, on the spectacle and having debates that are fun and entertaining. One of the things I suggested, I don't know if he'd be interested in this, is take two people that are good debaters, doesn't have to be me, but two people that you trust are good debaters, and like imagine it was me versus Andrew Wilson, and the topic is literally drawn from a hat 5 seconds before the debate. And you're like, okay, you're affirmative, you're negative. And so it's like, okay, we're going to debate that Islam is the best religion. Andrew, you're going to argue for it. Rob, you're against it. Go. You know, and you do that for like a half an hour. But it has to be people that are entertaining and capable of debating anything, because I think the audience would get a fucking kick out of it. And you can ham it up. And, you know, but that's not going to get you the big click on someone just searching debate. Like Cenk Uyghur versus Ben Shapiro, that's going to get big numbers. Right? Or Ben Shapiro debate. Ben Shapiro
is local.
Well, there you go. Maybe Ben would come. So, you know, and I understand James reached out to me and said that people are less interested in political debates. I don't even disagree with that.
So actually, he's, again, this is only going by analytics. However, I think his data is skewed, for one thing. Second, literally, everyone that we talked to at and after DebateCon, nobody cared about the religion debate. They were actually there to see Andrew.
Right. My guess is 80% of the audience that was there to see Andrew.
And the guys that were, and there was that one other person debating religion that day that I can't remember who it was, and they wanted to see their debate as well. But here's the thing. And I told James I gave the input to James that I think that making it based on religion is kind of nuts. I told him, I said, I would pick some really good debate prompts, and the people who are going to argue from a religious perspective are going to use that worldview, and they're going to let that be known pretty normal or right out of the gate. Nobody really wants to see, I don't anyway, another Muslim versus Christian, which is better debate. Nobody wants it. I don't care. Nobody else cares. But I would stop everything I'm doing to watch, is Christianity good for the U.S. and just or actually no, let's not even say that. Which moral system is better for the U.S. And Andrew would obviously come at that from a Christian point of view. Fabian Liberty would come at it from a ANCAP point of view, and it would be a fucking great debate. It would be 2.5 to 3 hours of awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that what the names are one thing, and I'm telling you right now, I would not deign to give any advice to James about how to get big names on, because certainly
I don't care about the up card. Look, that's his
right. But here's what he needs to realize. Here's what my suggestion would be. There's two other areas that you could make this prestigious. That is the talent and the entertainment value of the debates. So having two big names that have a boring conversation that no one really gives a shit might get you clicks in the short term, but is that building your brand for the long term? So you want debates that are done by people that are entertaining and that are good. That's one. The other thing is, it has nothing to do with anything we're talking about here. You want the event to be prestigious, which means the venue, the hospitality. You want it to be an event where people say, fucking A, man, last time I was there, I ate the best food. I was treated the best. You know, that's what you want, you know?
And that's where I come in, because James was literally going to do it in Newark again in a different hotel. And I literally said, no, I can't do that. So it was my suggestion to do it. First of all, I did an internal poll in my chat and in the groups I'm in. Where would you go to see where would you want to go for DebateCon? It was basically Newark, Dallas, Atlanta, Nashville. Nashville overwhelmingly won. Atlanta was like, nobody wants to go to Atlanta. Nobody wanted to go to Newark. Dallas was a distant second. When James did his polling, same exact results.
Nashville's awesome. Who doesn't want to be in Nashville?
Nashville's where it's at. So then I said, look, I don't know if what you're committed to. I don't know what the budget is. I'm just going to give you my recommendation. I would do it in either an actual conference center like the Gaylord Hotel or which is the Opryland Hotel, which is super nice. Don't have to stay there. Just you can rent the room.
Yep.
Vanderbilt University, another university. Which I can't. I'm not gonna. But Gaylord and Vanderbilt are obvious choices. So and like three other venues, and we both agreed that the one that I felt was number one. So does James. I think it's going to be. I think that's where it's going to end up being. It obviously money. Plays.
It's a hotel or at Vanderbilt.
No, it's at a. It's probably going to be at a college. I think we're getting.
Do you know the name of it, or you don't want to say?
I know the one that. Yeah, I mean, I put the list together
because if they have a debate team, I may have a connection to reach out to them.
I don't know if they have a debate team or not, but
Vanderbilt definitely does.
Yeah, well, and the problem with there's no problem with Vanderbilt other than it's very difficult to stay near there cheaply. There's like a lot of parameters that I had to. Like it needs to be relatively easy to get to. Vanderbilt really isn't. You need to be able to stay close to the hotel.
Sure.
Close to the venue with, there needs to be really nice accommodations for someone like Cheng comes down. There needs to be very modest accommodations for someone that's not Cheng coming down. That's, writing their own ticket. So there was an entire like array of variables that I put into this, and I spent about a week figuring it out, and I think I got it nailed. So that's going to be the deal. And there's all kinds of other things that I'm trying to work, but it's right now I actually need to talk to James. But the about the people. So one thing is I think it does Chink a lot of good to debate you or Scott or someone like that, right? It does him a lot of good because he's debated all these other people so many times, nobody cares anymore.
Mm-hmm.
They already know. Like I haven't watched Chink in 4 years until he debated Andrew.
Right.
If he hadn't debated Andrew, I still wouldn't be watching. Because who cares? Who cares if he debates? I forget who he debated last, but for like the fourth time. And those guys know that. They realize that. And they, it's the same reason Destiny would debate someone that wasn't on his level, because he needs somebody that his crowd hasn't seen him debate 10 times. Right.
Yeah, I mean that's certainly true. You know, I think from your end, I think you got the right idea. Like, people lose sight of that. You have to make it, you want to make it so that the participants remember having a good time, right? And
Yeah.
and hospitality means so much. From my limited understanding, I can't tell you how many debate tournaments at the collegiate level grew up and got big versus how many shrank in size based on just the accommodations that you were given. Oh, very nice hotel they put you up in. Their catering was very nice. The location was wonderful. There were a bunch of places we could go visit that were within a short distance, you know.
Yeah.
That makes a difference. And just like the host being gracious to you while they're there. If you had a question, oh yeah, let me get to the bottom of that.
There's so much that MDD just hadn't. It never occurred to James to do it, right? Because he's a PhD, he's a teacher.
Sure.
He's got a whole life that outside of this that he doesn't. You know, it eats up all. You know, he has only so much headspace, right? But I'm an operations guy, and I see all of this. Like, we should go live once we have the location. Then then we'll get the date, and then we're going to go live with ticket sales live on his website, so you can go ahead and buy tickets, and merch. So you can buy shirts, you can buy the hats, you buy whatever. That's all going to go live on his site months before the event. Like, the event's going to be in October. I want to have everything. My goal is to have everything done, tied up, bow on it, end of April.
Yeah, and you want promotion. You want time for promotion, right?
Right. And everybody that comes, so if he signed you up, Rob, I told him this. If he signed you up, you would have to sign a contract and pay a deposit saying that you are going to be there. Now, you get your money back when you show up, but if you don't show up and the MDD has promoted you for 6 fucking months,
yeah,
and you decide 2 weeks out you're just not going to show up because you've already got the benefit,
right?
You know.
Well, and think what you do is, particularly like that, even if it's a smaller streamer like me, but even someone like Andrew Wilson, if you set it up 6 months ahead of time, if it's written in stone, if people have deposits down, you allow them to promote. So they're telling their audience again, how much of the audience at the last Modern Day Debate were fans of the Crucible, right?
Like 60%,
right? And so that's the beauty of, you allow people to self-promote. You give them time, you know that they're going,
absolutely.
Right? And even like someone like Cenk, he would be able to be for weeks, hey, I'm going to this thing. It's going to, and you again, like, you know, that's the promotion. I think you know more than me about this shit. So I'm not breaking any, you know, as far as like the big names, James probably knows more about that than me. But I do think that there's a middle issue, which is you need to be putting on a spectacle. You need to be putting on some, it's like professional wrestling, right? You could have Hulk Hogan come out of retirement and wrestle a match at WrestleMania, and that'll get eyeballs one time, but the quality will be shit. And so it's not going to do much for you the next time. But then you can have the people in the undercard that are super talented, that are doing things that are entertaining. That's what people are going to come back for eventually.
Yeah, but all right. So, and like, yes, but the other thing is that it has to be great, right? So you have, not only does it have to be great, people have to be able to plan for it. So we have to have everything wrapped up in April so that people like yourself, it takes weeks, months to get time off sorted.
Sure. I'm going to have to put in time at least 2 months at a time, vacation.
Yeah, if you know in April that October the 3rd, right, and 4th, you're going to be in Nashville, you can buy plane tickets when they're cheap. You can shop hotel rooms when they're cheap. You can do all of this stuff and have no work. And you don't know what a burden it is, all the last minute planning. And when you put people through that, they don't like it, right? And they'll just stop halfway through. They're like, "This is too much trouble. I'm not going." So it's better to do it the way that we're doing it.
Yeah, I agree.
And I'm doing this voluntarily. Like, he's not paying me anything. Now I've got some people that are working behind the scenes. Michelle, who helps me out. I've got one of my guys is doing some website stuff for us, and they're going to get paid. And it's not going to be much, you know. I mean, it's a small organization,
sure,
but they're going to get paid. The guy, and I told James, I said, look, when my people help, they need to get paid. I don't need to get paid, right? Like, I'm doing this to make sure it's a better deal. But the interesting thing, or not the interesting, the thing about the way I think is you're either pro or you're not pro. And when I went to DebateCon in Newark, it was not pro.
Right.
It was the worst thing I'd ever seen in my life. Like,
you can't have that. That does
but there's
damage in the
so
future.
much potential.
Right.
So much potential, right? The one of the best debates of the weekend was in the fucking hallway.
That's what I heard. Yeah.
It was legit. It was awesome. And so this is a type of event that can have a lot of energy, and it can draw people that ordinarily probably wouldn't come. Like we might be able to get Ben Shapiro.
Right. Especially if
would,
the key is you build an experience that people want to come to and want to watch. Maybe that doesn't pay off getting Ben Shapiro this time, but 3 debate cons from now, when Cenk's like, yeah, I went there, had a great time. It was put together very professionally, had, it got eyeballs on me that really don't. If that reputation builds up, what you don't want is people staying at dirt motels, scrambling to find food, events canceling. If you have that sort of shit, that reputation builds. And so the more prestige, you might be able to get someone like me, but are you going to be able to get someone like Ben Shapiro or Charlie Kirk? Probably not, right? So you have to build up. And if you want to build up that reputation, you have to make sure that end of it's successful. Yeah. I think another thing that you might suggest to change, how many days did they do it last time? Was it 2?
Yeah, 2 days.
And how many hours a day was it going on?
Not enough, in my opinion. So in theory, started at 8. It was more like 10. And it would go to the first day it went to 5, maybe 6 o'clock. And the second day it went to 6 or 7.
Here's what I would recommend is try to find ways to you're going to have a limited amount of people you invite to participate, right? How can you use those people in multiple ways? Andrew, you're willing to have this religious
thing. So when we were racing in pro racing, obviously, every one of the drivers, there was a 1-hour scheduled autograph session where all of the drivers had to be in their, uniforms, helmets, and they had to be sitting at a table. There was a line and they had their hero cards and they'd sit there and sign autographs for an hour. And so fans knew that they could come and get an autograph from their favorite driver at that time of day. And so now, obviously, I don't think that you can do an autograph session for DebateCon guys, but you could have a bull session
Q&A,
right. for 20 or 30 people. You could open up a small room and have a bull session for 30, 40, minutes, an hour, and just have have you or have, and I'm picking on you because you're in front of me, but Andrew could sit there for an hour and just bullshit with a bunch of people. Not one-on-one, obviously, but maybe 1-on-20, or 1-on, whatever, and just have a great time and maybe take some pictures, shake some hands, throw some babies out windows, whatever. And
it's a great, and you should also, again, the last time the biggest audience you had in person was Andrew Wilson. So exploit that. Hey, Andrew, you're debating Cenk, right? And then you're going to do this religious debate. But what if we had you do something that's sort of less serious? You're in a debate and you're going to fucking debate Rob on, a random topic that we'll put, or you're going to debate fucking this no-name left-wing guy, but the topic's going to be something sort of silly, whatever, just something because
globalism, debate globalism.
Well, and those serious topics are fine, but you could even have it be something fun, right? It could literally be a topic like Twitch versus YouTube, which has the best, shit like that. But the key is, if 50% of the audience is there to see one guy, well, if Andrew's debating once, what are they going to do the rest of the day? Maybe they'll stick
ended
around.
up debating 3 times.
Well,
also because the Muslims wouldn't show up. They don't show up.
So you find ways to keep that crowd enthused and entertained, and you set up a reputation for that you're having fun, you're doing things that are fun, you're doing things that are very serious, topics that are very serious, and you don't ask Cenk to do 4 debates, you don't ask Ben Shapiro to do 4 debates, but people that are doing these debates like Andrew or me, or if you get someone like Destiny or someone like Pisco that was there last time, they'll do multiple debates, and they'll do it on topics that fucking maybe they're not the most comfortable with. And I think that shit's right. And it illustrates.
I really want you and Scott there. I mean, my goal, to be honest, is I really want you and Scott to be there. I really want Scott to debate one-on-one with someone that's the opposite of him. Right? Like
commie.
somebody that speaks really fast, somebody that's just trying to just throw out a bunch of gish gallop information so Scott can just like hammer it down, because I think that would be a great matchup. I think it'd be a great show. And because I'm looking at, look, okay, yeah, all right, who wins, who loses, whatever. I'm looking at it for the show. I'm looking at it for what it's going to look like on YouTube, what it's going to look like in clips, what it's going to look like live,
Yeah,
And,
I mean, but yeah, we could talk about it more. I'm willing to, it's the only criteria for me. I don't need to get paid. Like, I'd probably need to make it so it's not a financial detriment to me. So I'd have to have some sort of compensation as far as getting there and getting put up in a hotel. But other than that, the only thing I need is just enough time to call off work and plan for it. Like, it can't be like, hey, I need you to come down next Thursday. I'll be like, dude, I can't do that. Like, my work's
and I've made the point, and I'm going to continue to make the point to James that I didn't hear about DebateCon until literally like the week before it happened.
Me too.
And I'm like, you can't do that. People have to ask.
I only heard about it through Andrew Wilson, just to be clear. So it wasn't even like James's own advertisement. It was literally, I just happened to be watching the Crucible.
That's actually a good point. And I actually need to get in with some of the more news type content creators that do like, hey, did you know this event's going to go on and all that kind of stuff, so you can kind of pump it out through other channels than just Modern Day Debate.
You need to be promoting it locally. You want people that are local that aren't really into watching, like college students. You want them to come.
I anticipate that we're going to get a lot of college students.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Now, at the university you're talking about, I probably don't have any connections to whatsoever. But there are certain universities, if you did it at like Penn State, I have connections to people that are there, and they don't have a traditional policy debate team, but I bet they have a public debate group that would be, I know the Young Republicans would be more than happy to volunteer to help at Penn State.
You know what? I got to reach out to them. I have to reach out to them, the local guys, because I hadn't even thought about that. Reach out to the Young Republicans. So this one, the one in October, should be in Nashville. Then they're I think he wants to do one in the spring, and I think that's like April or May, and that will be probably in Dallas.
Mm-hmm. No, you're doing sort of east and then further out west. That's not a bad idea.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think that I like James. I think James is a good guy. I think that it's a great market. I think that particularly when you see the success of people like Andrew that are breaking, and even Destiny that are breaking into the mainstream with like Piers Morgan. You saw Destiny talking with Jordan Peterson and Ben Shapiro. This debate, transitioning just the online debate panels to having real world names with Debate Pro online people doing in real life stuff, that's a market. Like, if that's ran right, it will become a brand and be successful. The question is, how do you run it right? An idea is one thing, implementing it's another. So, I think that from your history, you're going to know the production value, the importance of that.
Oh yeah.
And I think James is right about bringing in names that'll be attractions. So then the only thing that you gotta do is that filling out the rest of stuff. What is the impression that you want people to walk away from? Do you want them to be like, my impression is I saw Cenk debate? Or do you want the impression to be like, wow, how cool was it to see 8 hours on 2 days of people having lively debates that were highly entertaining and competitive, right? And if becomes the brand, I think that it has legs to grow beyond just one specific individual.
Yeah, I really like I like everything about it except the way. I didn't like the execution at all of Newark. And I've told James, I gave him a lot of criticism, a lot of feedback. He took it all in stride. The Daily Wire is here. We have, what's her name? I can't think of her name. Brett Cooper is still in the area. So there's a good chance that, this could be a really good event for James. If he needs to have somebody on his end. As far as production value, I talked to Chickenfoot, and we talked about, we need cameras in all the corners of the room so that you can switch and watch the crowd come in. And the size of the room has to be very carefully considered with how many people you're going to put in it, because you want the room packed. You want people to feel like, you know, because when the room's packed, you can talk and there's no, when the room's empty, you get a lot of echo. And so if you and I are talking, it's very loud and people hear it. But when you have people packed, you can talk normally and it's just still, you know, it's just a buzz in the air because there's so many people in it and it mutes it. And so that encourages people to talk and to feel good and all of that. And,
I would the last thing I'll suggest about this is I would reach out to groups like you got Alex Stein that came on, right? Alex is working with the Blaze. Reach out to Alex and see if you could get like Glenn Beck or other people at the Blaze. They don't have to come debate, but if they're promoting it, right? And the way you promote it to them is like, look, we're fostering debate. And I would even, from your perspective as a righty, I would tell Alex, like, sell it like this. When debates occur on equal footing, we win. That's the truth. That's why we're pro free speech, because when we compete equally in the marketplace of ideas, we win, right? And so if we start this prestigious organization where these real life debates are occurring semi-annually and all of a sudden big names are coming in, and instead of seeing like, you know, imagine a Tucker Carlson sitting down with, you know, Dan Crenshaw and having a big debate on, you know, like that's that's not going to happen.
Lofty, brother. That's lofty. I like that a lot.
Right, but that's the way you, and then reach out to the Daily Wire, reach out to Turning Point USA. Charlie Kirk's already going to college campuses. So reach out. Imagine if you could be like, look, Charlie, we're inspired by your message of sort of debate and conversing with people that disagree. We've started this organization that we're trying to foster debates and getting young people to come watch those debates and become active participants. Like, is this something you would be interested? You don't even have to come debate, but like sort of helping us promote it. And maybe if you would like coming, we'll try to find someone that we think could be your caliber that you could come have a discussion with. I think that like one of the problems that we have as right-wing streamers is there's not sort of big institutional backing for any of us. We're all sort of on our own. The only person that's sort of cracked through is Andrew, in that he made his own brand. But other than that, it's like Alex is working with the Blaze. Okay, he's doing good. But you don't see, like, Turning Point's doing a great job of creating activists that are going to college campuses, but how many of them are doing podcast or production? The Daily Wire does their own thing with their own people. They're doing great. But you have, like, the Democrats that are out there actively promoting left-wing streamers through groups like Progressive Victory PAC. And I'm sorry, I'm just going to say the truth. I already sort of alluded to this. They're paying people like Wick thousands of dollars a month. Oh, yeah. And how many more? You could throw a fucking rock and hit right-wingers that are more talented than them, that are struggling through with.
That's my whole goal with my podcast is I want in the midterm elections, I want to get paid to say what I was going to say anyway.
Yeah, well, I think I'm talking to people behind the scenes. I don't really want to say their names, but that are connected to one of the people we just talked about. And my pitch that I've been making for a long time, I used to have a radio show, is what I want to do is merge the traditional conservative radio audience with the new online audience. Because I think that there is an overlap, that media is switching more from, like, radio's dying, television's dying, online's where it's at. And so if you could somehow convince Rush Limbaugh's audience to be watching, you know, Michael Knowles on a podcast every day, think of the power that has. Think of the numbers that you could get. And if you're someone with big money and you could make investments right now, because the problem is with a lot of conservatives, we have full-time jobs. So maybe I'm talented enough to be a fucking full-time radio guy. Like, I'm like 1/10 as talented as Rush Limbaugh, and I could have 1/10 of his audience. That's still an incredible investment opportunity for someone to invest in that. The problem that I have is, how can I quit my job, right? Because if I quit my job, and let's say I make $100,000 on YouTube this year, which is laughable. If I break 12,000, it would be huge. But let's say I made $100,000. I'm still at the whim of YouTube. If YouTube does this, I lose all my money. So I can't quit my job. But the way you get around that's have people that are investing behind the scenes. Imagine that you have a radio show, right? And the radio network's like, so here's how you're going to get paid. We'll pay you every month as long as we feel like it. Like, that's not an opportunity that you're jumping at to quit your job to do, because if next month they say, hey, kick rocks, then you're out of luck. You quit your job. So getting financial backing doesn't have to be me. That's not what I'm saying. But they should be promoting people, and not just people like me. Alex Stein doing more of the comedy stuff, right? They should be promoting sort of conservative right-wing entertainers, like conservative right-wing people that are doing like the Twitch video game stuff. They should be promoting those people. The idea is to build these online audience, and the numbers, now is the time to strike, because the online audience is going to be traditionally younger people, and you're seeing the numbers with Trump's approval numbers that actually younger people are leaning more towards Trump than even any of the other populations. So if you're wealthy right now and you're like, I want to make money and I want to have influence, by getting on the ground floor and backing some of these up and coming streamers, or creating your own people that are up and coming and organic. I mean, look at the market like someone like Hassan has. Look at how when AOC streams to Twitch or Instagram, how she has hundreds of thousands of people watching. That's important for the future of the country, for like the direction that media is going. And so I agree with you. I'm in talks, and I'll probably have no success. I'm not like super Mr. Connected, but I do happen to know someone who knows wealthy producers that work with one of those big people. And I'm in talks with trying to sort of set up an interview where it's like, look, I'm not saying you have to give me money. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying an investment in a network of people that are doing all sorts of things: comedy, video game stuff, culture stuff, music, like singing, stuff like that, politics, debating. You should be investing in that, because that's where the future is going to be for this movement. So I think DebateCon fits right into that. I think the idea that you have a platform that's like specializing,
Yeah, I really think that DebateCon should get some money from some form of promotional agencies, but just a couple of things. First, generally, I'm courting PAX right now. Like, I know people at PAX, and I'm like, hey, I already say this stuff. I actually believe it. I go debate people on these topics. Pay me.
Right. Good luck.
Like, and
they don't want to throw their money like that.
Well,
I know I've had, I wish you luck, man. I know I've had these sorts of talks with people. Again, you can make fun of Progressive Victory PAC all you want, right? But they're smart.
I'm not making fun of Progressive Victory.
Yeah, I'm not saying you are.
I'm using them as an example,
right?
Like,
they're smart.
They did a very smart thing. And I'm actually, when I talk to these people, I'm like, look, do you see what Progressive Victory did? They weren't even paying talented people. They're paying Brianna Wu. Like, that's not a talented person.
Connor,
you stuck enough money out there, things happened, right? And so that's the conversation I'm having. So one thing about Brianna Wu, and I don't know if I told you this, but so Alex Stein and I, we were kind of hanging out, we're joking, laughing, just trying to be cool. He was being cool. I wasn't that cool.
I like Alex. He's a good guy.
He's fucking hilarious. And so as he's walking off to go do his debate with Jasmine Jafar, I said, I'll pay you $1 every time you call her a degenerate in the debate. And he turned around and he said, how about $5 every time I call her a whore? And I said, you're on. And I owe him $65.
Well done, Alex. He's funny, man. Alex is a good guy. He's offered to have me. He's been on my show many times and offered to have me on his. I got to get in touch with him, actually, to do a show with him. But no, it's a good idea. And I'm glad that you've come on board, because one of the things I learned this lesson when I ran for Congress, there was a guy, I won't say his name because maybe some local people were watching, but there was a guy I really respected. And I thought I was the ideal candidate, but if I wasn't going to be the one, I would have picked this guy. I think he's a really good guy who happens to share a lot of political beliefs as mine. Not all, but super knowledgeable. My buddy Carlos, that was a campaign manager for one of the other people, I became friends with him after this. And we would talk about this guy. I remember we would go to events at his house and stuff, and Republican events that he would put on. And he was like, you want to know what his downfall is? He is unwilling to recognize that he can't do everything. So he's his own campaign manager. He sets up all of the venues. When he's going to speak somewhere, it's him on the phone talking to the people. It's him setting the schedule. And he's like, that's too many hats. You can't do that, right? You need to be willing to say, what am I good at? What am I not? What do I need help with? And I see that in James. I think James has a great idea and does things that are really great. But does he know everything. Does he know about production values? Does he know? And it's not shameful to bring
they
people
hired
on that.
You know, I don't know if you noticed, the production was great this time because they hired people.
Good. Yeah, and that's the way. But you have to be willing to say, I'm not perfect at everything. I'm in my specialized set, but if I'm doing something that requires more than that, then I have to bring in other people. For me, one of my weak suits is I have no connections to anyone, like at all. And so I met some people that did have connections. And so, like, when I do my 24-hour stream, how is it that little old me, all of a sudden, here's Glenn Thompson, Pennsylvania's longest serving Republican House member. Here's Dan Muser, House member, from District. What's he?
I listen to a lot of that.
Yeah. And it's like, well, how do I get those guests? Because I know a guy who knows a guy. And I was willing to admit, like, I'm really shit at production. So I had my friend Black Elk, my editor. He's setting up people. He's doing the producing work. My friend Carlos, he's doing production work. And it works out. But for me to do all of that, plus then stream 25 and a half hours, like nonstop, it would be impossible. It just wouldn't be possible to be talking. I'm talking to you right now, and you're leaving in 5 minutes, and another guest is coming on. Well, my Black Elk's on the phone with that person. Okay, we're going to send you the link. Blah blah. How could I do that? It would be impossible. So my advice to James or anyone else out there is, the larger the sort of production you're putting on, the more help you're going to need. And there's no shame in that, and there's no shame in admitting, like, certain
it's easy to get volunteers. So one of the things I learned really quickly in racing was. I only needed to pay 2 people per weekend per car.
Right.
I would get 3 or 4 volunteers come out of the woodwork that would work. I can't say it on YouTube, like a very specific subset of people.
I hear you. Yeah. They'll get us. Don't do it. Yeah.
And so they would work hard, very hard. And, I'd buy them dinner. They had free reign of any of the sodas or all the coolers were open to, everything. They got a t-shirt, they came on board, but they worked really hard. They put in the effort, but that got us through a lot, man. Like volunteer people and very talented people will volunteer their time.
When here's the other thing, right? Like, and I learned this running for Congress. When you make people part of a team, it means more to them, right?
Yes.
And so if you're running for Congress and you're like, hey, I'm putting out a YouTube video for 5 minutes to explain what we're up to this week, or I'm sending out a letter, that will get a certain level of engagement and enthusiasm. But if you say you're part of this team, when we're coming to this town, we need you to do X. Not only will people do it, they'll be happy to do it, because then you're illustrating to them, like, you are valued. Your knowledge and your skill matters. And so, volunteering is huge, and it really does. And I've been on the other end of that. I've been the volunteer, and it does make you feel like you're more than just bystander, rah, 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 cheering for something. You're actually working towards a goal and making it so.
Well, you feel those guys, you feel special, for the race team, you were pushing the car around, or and we had what was called an open paddock. So like anybody that wanted to could come up and look at the cars. And somebody wanted to, and of course, I hate people. It's hard to tell that, but I don't like people, and I really don't like crowds. But I'm literally in a sport where there's 20, 30,000 people milling around, right? And so, and I have to be nice to them because it's an open paddock. I can't just put the ropes up and say you can't come in. Everybody could just walk. So I'm like, look, if I have to be nice, every one of you dudes has to be nice. Like every one of you have to be nicer than me. And so they would literally have to, like if we would have people all the time come up and they'd be looking at the car. And I said, look, if somebody's like showing any interest at all, you need to put them in the car. If they want to sit in the car.
That's right.
If it's safe, start the car.
That's right. I totally agree. Hey, I got to get going.
Right?
People in my chat are yelling at me. I have this doctor appointment tomorrow, and I got some stuff I got to do tonight before I go. But
what's funny is I saw your wife leave your chat, and I was like, Rob's in trouble now.
Yeah, I'm getting texts. So, but I still got to read my super chat, so I'll let you go. But Man, I appreciate it. We should talk more often. And if
Yeah, man.
we'll shoot the
You're
breeze
good.
behind the scenes, and we'll whatever. If James needs help and stuff, I have a limited skill set and time to be able to help with some of that stuff. But you know, there might be some things I could offer, including maybe contacting some local debate teams to see if they'd want to get involved. Or
I like that idea. I had actually talked to James about you know, since he's a PhD, reaching out to the college as well, and we'll talk later about the specific college and all of that we think it's going to be at. And again, look, nothing's signed. There's nothing in ink yet, man. This is all just it's very fluid, but it's looking good. It's what I want to have happen. So hopefully we can make it happen. My chat says you're a great guy and they love you, and
thank you.
More of you on the show. So we'll do this again real soon.
Set up a debate, moderate a debate, find a lefty. I'll debate him.
Actually, I'm supposed to debate Tyler, the average debate viewer.
I don't know.
Or average debate guy or some old watcher. I don't know. Anyway, so he was on with me last night. He wants to debate globalism versus isolationism. He says he's going to send me his argument so I can review it and know where, you know, what his worldview is going to be and all of that. And I'm like, okay, that's great. DM it to me. I'm going to, so that would be my first set up 1v1. So I think I'm going to ask Andrew if he'll host it, if he'll be my moderator.
Yeah.
Just do it on my channel. And then, you know, like Non-Fon always wants to debate me on tariffs for some stupid ass reason. And
I talked to him and he started going off. They brought me on to talk about the Destiny shit, and they brought him on specifically to talk to me about policy if I wandered into policy. We had a brief discussion about tariffs. And I know he was researching that. So I'm not surprised that he wants to debate.
He's been researching it forever. And he thinks he has me because he's one of those guys that he's a numbers guys, right? And you know, and God, man, I feel bad because I know you need to leave, but it's always the problem with their argument is always they're like, experts say that, and I'm like, which fucking experts? Which ones? If you're going to appeal to that authority, which authority is it? Is it your authority? Is it my authority? Is it New Braunfels, Texas? Is it their authority? Is that
you want me to tell you how to beat Non-Fon in that debate? Here's the only argument you need. Yeah. Non-Fon, isn't every argument you're making here also against subsidies? And he'll say yes, and you'll be like, did you support the Green New Deal?
Yeah.
Because he admitted to me, he supports subsidies for green energy because he thinks that the net goal is worth it. Okay. Yes. So then if we think that fentanyl deaths are abhorrent, why shouldn't we support something like tariffs to lower that?
You and I are going to have to talk offline. You got to go. Read your super chats.
I will.
Go do your stuff. Don't make your wife mad at me.
I won't. She'll be mad at me, not you. So
you say that.
She'll say Grid was nice enough to put up with you for 3 hours. So now I appreciate you having me on. I really do. And yeah, well, like I said, if you ever want to moderate a debate and you want me to come on your channel and debate someone, I would do that.
If you ever need a moderator for a debate, look, man, I gotta be honest with you. I'm retired. I retired at 45. I don't do shit really, but I'm very busy because I volunteer for all kinds of shit.
Sure. Yeah.
So, but if you need me, if you give me enough time, I got you, bro.
All right. Here's the problem, though. I always end up saying, yeah, whatever moderator you want, because it's always some lefty. It's like, I want a moderator. And then they'll be like, okay, Wick, okay, Dylan, you know, something like that. I'm like, I don't give a shit. Whatever.
You can be like, hey, you ever heard of this guy over here? Yeah, he doesn't give a shit one way or the other. He's just going to be, I'm absolutely fair.
All right, man. Well, hey, thank you. We'll talk soon.
Yeah.
All right, man.
We'll
take
talk
it easy,
to you, man. Go read your super chats.
I will. We'll see you.
All right. See you later. Bye.
All right. Let's see if I can figure this out.
Click the pink X.
There we go. Boop, boop, boop. It's too complicated for someone like me. We'll see you, man.
See ya.
All right. I think
there he goes. All right. He found the pink X. I knew he would. That's because Grid, me, Glenn, and Ticky Tack embarrassed. Did we embarrass him? I didn't think we embarrassed him. He's still butthurt. Oh, interesting. Wow. I didn't realize we embarrassed him, Mr. But he always wants to debate me on tariffs. Like, oh yeah, you know, debate tariffs, and I mean, we can. We can talk tariffs. You know, I don't know why you want to debate me on tariffs. So, yeah, I guess if you must, you must. That was great, man. That was a great show. What a great night. That was awesome. So relaxing. DebateCon needs Tomato to do round card videos. I think you mean down card. It was on Glenn's. Oh yeah, okay. I don't remember that, but yeah, okay. I mean, I don't think we beat him up or anything. So yeah. Yeah, Rob was pretty good. I saw some people kind of complaining, you know, because he can be a little long winded, but that's all right. Yeah, subsidies for me, but not for thee. That's right, man. That's right. Yeah, I'm a pretty good mod, really. Trying to think. See, here's the thing. The way that Sarah wants to do the debate is kind of the same. I don't know. It's an interesting thing. We'll talk about it at some point. Yeah, no dead air tonight. That's for sure. Serendipity, good to see you. Good to see you. Vince, TVT, good to see you. Good input tonight, TVT. Appreciate that. To everyone that's hung out this long, man, I really appreciate it. We started early, we ended late. I guess that's just how it is around here. So, you know. Yeah. Whew, man. Well, is there anybody live? Maybe I will end it now. Is there anybody live out there now? Oh, they got the tomato over there. Yeah. Ah, man, I'm really not seeing a bunch of live out there, man. Andrew's live. It is true. It's the horse ride. Hey, let me grab the link here. Yeah, guys, I'm kind of beat now, to be honest with you. I'm a little tired. Whew. Can hide in the shed. That's right. The shed's good. I don't know if it's the start of the next Daily Wire Media Group, but I got to be honest with you. I really am having a good time, and I really like that. I really like helping with DebateCon. I really want it to be a great event. I really want it to be exceptional, so that the next one is even better. What's up, Imperious? Good to see you. How you doing, buddy? I'm tired because I didn't go to sleep until like 2:00, and I got up at 5:30 or 6. That's why I'm tired. That is why I am tired. Arthur Dye, it was good to see you back in the chat. Good to see. I missed having you in the chat actually. So, all right, ladies and gentlemen, I know that this is early for me to punch out. I'm going to send you guys over to watch. Wait a minute, hang on, I got the wrong. I think I got the wrong link here. Stand by. Before I punch out, got to get the right link. To everyone that sent in super chats, I really appreciate it. I wasn't able to read them. The TTS did work. Hope it came through clearly for you. If not, well, we'll work on it. We'll work on it. All right. So. Oh, that's weird. There we go. Oh, all right. This is becoming annoying now. Got it. Got it. All right. Cool. All right, guys. I'm going to send you on over to Andrews. You guys have a great rest of your night. I should have probably sent you to Flo, but I'm going to send you to Andrew. You guys have a great rest of your night. I know it's early for me, but I'm going to get out of here. It does look like I am going to be debating or an average debate fan guy, whatever, on globalism. It's going to be a good time. In the meantime, you guys, we'll be back tomorrow night. Maybe back tomorrow night. I think it's chill stream, guys. I don't think I've got anything going on, anything big going. We'll probably just do some catch up, and we'll chat. We'll have a good time. No guests, no debates, no nothing tomorrow night that I'm aware of. But we'll see what kind of trouble I can get into. In the meantime, as always, be cool. Wear glasses if you need them, and get off my lawn. Night, guys.